At Grayson_Chi, 3:47 p.m. Thread something weird happening in Chicago. Got 3 separate tips today about map people downtown. Usually I'd dismiss this urban legend stuff, but the details are too consistent. Gonna dig into this. 3:48 p.m. 2/first report came from my editor's neighbor. Says his 73-year-old dad went missing Tuesday after talking to someone near Millennium Park. Security footage shows elderly man, Harold Kimmel, speaking with tall figure in what looks like 1940s clothing. 3:49 p.m. 3/Here's where it gets strange. The figure handed Harold what appeared to be a hand-drawn map. Not a tourist map, something sketched on aged paper. Harold studied it for maybe 30 seconds, nodded, and walked away. Haven't seen him since. 3:52 p.m. 4/ talked to Harold's son an hour ago. Guy's been calling hospitals, checking shelters. Says his dad never wanders off, sharp as a tack. The only thing, Harold left a note saying he was going to see what's really there. Left his wallet, keys, everything else behind. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through my apartment window as I scrolled through my notes. Chicago's October chill seeped through the glass, carrying with it the distant hum of the L train and the perpetual urban symphony I'd grown to love over 5 years of freelance journalism. But today, something felt different. The city's rhythm seemed slightly off, like a familiar song played in the wrong key. My phone buzzed with another DM. Maria from Redline Coffee had forwarded security footage from Tuesday morning. I downloaded the file, my laptop fan whirring as the grainy video loaded. There he was, Harold Kimmel, exactly as his son had described. Silver hair, navy windbreaker, that careful gait of someone who'd learned not to trust icy sidewalks. 4:07 p.m. 5/ just reviewed security footage. The person who approached Harold. Something's off about their proportions. Too tall, maybe 6 feet 8 inches or 6 feet 9 inches. Moves with weird, deliberate precision. And the clothes, vintage coat, fedora, like they stepped out of a 1940s film noir. The stranger in the footage moved with an unnatural economy of motion. Each step seemed measured, calculated. When they extended the map toward Harold, their arm moved in a perfectly straight line. No natural human sway or hesitation. I rewound the clip 3 times, studying the interaction. Harold's body language changed the moment he looked at the map, posture straightening, head tilting as if hearing something beyond the paper's surface. 4:15 p.m. 6/ something just happened. Was typing about the footage when every phone in my building started screaming. Emergency alert system. Message was, avoid strangers offering unsolicited navigation assistance in Chicago metropolitan area. Report incidents to local authorities. The alert's mechanical voice still echoed in my ears. I'd lived through tornado warnings, flash flood alerts, even an Amber Alert or 2, but this felt different. The phrasing was too specific, too careful. Navigation assistance instead of maps or directions. Someone had crafted this message with legal precision, like they were avoiding saying something directly. My journalistic instincts were screaming now. This wasn't random urban weirdness. This was a pattern someone official had recognized and was trying to control. 4:23 p.m. 7/ called Harold's son back. He confirmed getting the same alert, but says CPD told him they have no active investigation into missing persons related to cartographic incidents. Exact phrase. Who talks like that? I grabbed my camera bag and headed for the door. Harold's last known location was 20 minutes away by L train, and I needed to see Millennium Park myself before the trail went completely cold. The October air bit at my cheeks as I descended into the subway tunnel, the familiar smell of steel and electricity mixing with something else. Something faintly sweet, like old paper left too long in sunlight. The Crown Fountain area of Millennium Park was exactly as the security footage had shown, but walking through it myself revealed details the cameras couldn't capture. The spot where Harold had stopped, a seemingly random patch of concrete near the fountain's edge, felt different. The temperature dropped noticeably in that exact location, and the ambient city noise seemed muffled, as if heard through water. 5:18 p.m. 8/ At the scene now. Found something. Harold's reading glasses, cracked but not shattered, lying in the grass about 50 feet from where the security footage shows the interaction. No other personal items. But there's something else. I crouched down, my knees protesting against the cold concrete. Scattered around the glasses were small pieces of paper, yellowed with age. They looked hand-torn, roughly triangular, with faint pencil marks that might have been parts of a larger drawing. I carefully collected them in an evidence bag I'd learned to carry during my investigative work. Back home, I spread the paper fragments across my desk under a bright lamp. Slowly, a pattern emerged. These weren't random scraps, they were pieces of a map. Street names I recognized: Michigan Avenue, Lakeshore Drive, State Street. But the proportions were wrong, the angles impossible. Streets that ran parallel in reality intersected at acute angles on this map. Lake Michigan appeared to curve inland, swallowing parts of downtown that definitely existed. 6:45 p.m. 9/reconstructed fragments of Harold's map. This isn't Chicago as it exists. Streets are in wrong places, Lake Michigan has wrong shoreline, and there's a location marked with an X that doesn't correspond to anything on Google Maps. 6:47 p.m. 10/the X marks a spot that should be the intersection of Lower Wacker and Columbus. Checked city planning records. That intersection exists on paper, appears on official maps, but when I cross-referenced with Street View and satellite imagery, there's nothing there. My hands were trembling now, though I told myself it was just the cold. The intersection Harold's map marked with such careful precision existed in Chicago's official records. City planning documents referenced it. Traffic reports mentioned it. But every digital representation of that location showed empty space, a gap in the urban grid that somehow everyone had agreed to ignore. 7:23 p.m. 11/going to check the location tomorrow morning. Harold's son gave me permission to share anything that might help find his father. If anyone in Chicago has experienced something similar, strangers with maps, missing persons, impossible geography, DM me. This story isn't over. As I prepared for bed, the emergency alert repeated on my radio, the same carefully worded warning about navigation assistance. But this time, I noticed something new in the background static, a faint rhythm, almost like Morse code, spelling out coordinates that matched exactly with Harold's X. Whatever was happening in Chicago, it was bigger than one missing old man and a hand-drawn map. And tomorrow, I was going to find out exactly where that map led. 8:12 a.m. Morning update. 3 more people reached out overnight. Each described similar encounters. Tall figures in vintage clothing, hand-drawn maps, people who followed them and vanished. I'm starting to see a pattern here. 8:14 a.m. 2/case number 2, Jennifer Walsh, 34, mother of 2. Last seen Tuesday at Navy Pier. Security guard remembers her talking to someone dressed like they were going to a costume party. She left her purse and phone on a bench. Kids are staying with grandparents. I'd been awake since 5 a.m., my coffee growing cold as I sorted through DMs and tips. The city looked different from my kitchen window this morning. The familiar skyline somehow askew, as if someone had shifted it slightly while I slept. The emergency alert had repeated every 2 hours through the night, its mechanical voice cutting through my dreams with that same carefully neutral warning. The photograph Jennifer's sister had sent showed a woman with tired eyes and a genuine smile, the kind of person who'd stop to help lost tourists without thinking twice. According to the security guard at Navy Pier, she'd been heading toward the parking garage when the stranger approached. Tall figure, dark coat, carrying what looked like old-fashioned papers rolled up like a scroll. 8:28 a.m. 3/ just spoke with Navy Pier security. Guard says the person who approached Jennifer moved, like they were walking underwater, real slow and deliberate. Same description as Harold's encounter. Getting security footage sent over. 8:35 a.m. For case number 3, Marcus Rodriguez, 22, UIC student. Vanished from Union Station platform Wednesday morning. Witnesses saw him studying a hand-drawn paper, nodding, then walking toward tracks. Transit police found his backpack, but won't release details. The Union Station case bothered me most. Marcus had been waiting for the 7:15 a.m. train to campus, routine, predictable, surrounded by commuters. Yet somehow, someone had approached him in that crowded space and convinced him to abandon his normal route. His roommate described Marcus as painfully practical, the kind of person who used GPS for everything and never took shortcuts. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Unknown Chicago number. Grayson Penn? Speaking. Detective Scarlett Wynn, Chicago PD. I understand you've been asking questions about some missing persons cases. Her voice carried the flat professionalism I'd learned to recognize in cops who'd seen too much. But underneath it, something else, rehearsed, like she'd practiced this conversation. 9:17 a.m. 5/ just got off phone with CPD Detective Scarlett Wynn. Says the missing persons reports are unrelated incidents and advises me to focus on more productive stories. Her exact words. Since when do detectives discourage journalism? Mr. Penn, these are isolated incidents. People go missing in Chicago every day for perfectly ordinary reasons. We don't need amateur investigators complicating ongoing cases. What about the emergency alerts? Someone official clearly thinks there's a pattern. A pause. Too long. The alerts are precautionary. We have no evidence of coordinated criminal activity. The way she'd said criminal activity stuck with me. Not criminal behavior or crimes, but activity. Clinical, distant, like she was reading from a script. 9:45 a.m. 6/case number 4, David Huang, 43, financial analyst. Disappeared from the Loop District Thursday afternoon. His assistant saw him leave the building, following someone who looked like they belonged in a museum. Found his briefcase 3 blocks away, contents untouched. I was building a timeline now, mapping the disappearances across Chicago. Harold at Millennium Park on Tuesday. Jennifer at Navy Pier the same day. Marcus at Union Station Wednesday. David in the Loop Thursday. Each case followed the same pattern. Approached by unusually tall figure in vintage clothing. Presentation of hand-drawn map. Victim follows willingly. Personal belongings abandoned. The locations formed a rough circle around downtown Chicago, as if someone was systematically working their way through the city's major landmarks and transit hubs. 10:33 a.m. 7/Navy Pier security footage just arrived. Same figure as Millennium Park, I'm certain. Same height, same coat, same unnaturally precise movements. But here's what's disturbing. Timestamp shows this happened simultaneously with Harold's encounter. 2 places at once. I rewound the Navy Pier footage for the 4th time, checking and rechecking the timestamp. 11:47 a.m., Tuesday, October 15th. Harold's security footage from Millennium Park showed his encounter at exactly 11:47 a.m. the same day. Either the timestamps were wrong, or there were multiple figures operating with identical appearance and mannerisms. The figure approaching Jennifer moved with that same underwater deliberateness I'd noticed in Harold's footage. But when they extended the map, I caught something new. Their hand was perfectly steady, no natural human tremor or micro-movements. Like watching a photograph come to life. 11:12 a.m. 8/. Enlarged both security videos. The maps appear identical, same aged paper, same hand-drawn style, even what looks like the same tier patterns along the edges. But the content is different. Each map seems customized to its recipient. 11:15 a.m. 9/ found something else. In both videos, you can see other pedestrians unconsciously avoiding the map giver. Not looking directly at them, stepping slightly aside without seeming to notice. Like there's some instinctual recognition that something's wrong. My apartment felt smaller than usual, the walls pressing in as I studied frame after frame of security footage. The city outside my window hummed with its usual energy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. How many of these encounters were happening right now, in broad daylight, while everyone else went about their normal routines? The emergency alert sounded again, but this time I was ready with a recording app. As the mechanical voice delivered its warning about unsolicited navigation assistance, I isolated the background audio. That faint rhythmic pattern was definitely there. Not Morse code as I'd initially thought, but something more complex. Mathematical, like coordinates being transmitted in some kind of numerical cipher. 12:07 p.m. 10/emergency alert is broadcasting more than just the warning. There's encoded data in the background static, coordinates, maybe instructions. Someone with better audio equipment needs to analyze this. The rabbit hole keeps getting deeper. I called Jennifer's sister back, asked about the map specifically. She broke down crying before managing to tell me that Jennifer had left a voicemail Wednesday morning, after she'd officially disappeared. She sounded different. Said she was going to see where the map leads, and that she'd finally understand Chicago's real layout. That was the last we heard. 12:45 p.m. 11/ each victim left similar messages, references to Chicago's real layout or true geography. They're not being kidnapped. They're being convinced. But convinced of what? And by whom? 1:23 p.m. 12/ heading to Union Station to interview witnesses for Marcus's case. Transit police won't talk, but commuters might remember details they didn't tell authorities. We'll update with anything I find. As I packed my recorder and notebook, my phone rang again. Same unknown Chicago number as Detective Wynn's earlier call. Mr. Penn, this is Detective Wynn again. I want to strongly advise you against continuing this investigation. These cases are more complicated than they appear. Complicated how? Just drop it. For your own safety. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, replaying her tone. This wasn't professional courtesy or jurisdictional posturing. Detective Scarlett Wynn was scared. 1:47 p.m. 13/CPD detective just called to warn me off the story. Not for legal reasons or case interference, for my own safety. Either she knows something she's not saying, or Chicago's missing persons problem is bigger than 4 people with mysterious maps. Walking toward the L station, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A tall figure in a dark vintage coat stood at the corner of Michigan Avenue, holding what appeared to be aged paper. They weren't moving, weren't interacting with pedestrians, just standing there waiting, as if they knew exactly who they were looking for. I ducked into a coffee shop and watched through the window. The figure remained motionless for exactly 7 minutes, then walked away with that same underwater precision I'd seen in the security footage. They were still active, still recruiting, and now I understood why Detective Wynn was scared. 2:15 p.m. 14/ just saw one of them. Downtown Michigan Avenue. Same description as the footage. They're not hiding, they're operating in plain sight, and somehow most people don't seem to notice them. Thread continues tomorrow with Union Station findings. Whatever was happening in Chicago, I was now certain of one thing. I was being watched. 7:33 a.m. Sleepless night analyzing the map fragments. What I found changes everything. The artistic style, the paper composition, even the pencil graphite, it's all identical across every piece. One artist. One source. I'd spread Harold's reconstructed map fragments across my dining table like puzzle pieces, each yellowed scrap illuminated under my desk lamp. The October morning light filtering through my apartment windows made the aged paper seem to glow, revealing details I'd missed in yesterday's rushed examination. My coffee had gone cold hours ago, but sleep felt impossible when every fragment seemed to whisper secrets about Chicago's hidden geography. 7:35 a.m. 2/ used a magnifying glass on the pencil work. The pressure, stroke patterns, even tiny inconsistencies in line weight are identical across all fragments. Either one person drew every map, or someone's copying with machine-like precision. Neither option is comforting. The more I studied the fragments, the more convinced I became that these weren't random street maps gone wrong. The artistic technique showed intentional distortion. Familiar Chicago landmarks stretched and warped according to some internal logic I couldn't grasp. Lake Michigan curved inland in impossible spirals. The Loop District folded back on itself like origami. Streets I'd walked 1,000 times intersected at angles that hurt to contemplate. My phone buzzed with a DM from an account I didn't recognize at @checonspiracy_OK. Saw your thread. Been tracking the map people for 8 months. Coffee? I have photos you need to see. 8:47 a.m. 3/ meeting with someone who claims to have been investigating this for months. Usually I'd be skeptical of conspiracy theorists, but at this point, anyone with additional information is worth hearing out. Leah Knox looked exactly like I'd expected a Chicago conspiracy theorist to look. Multiple piercings, faded band t-shirt, the kind of intense eye contact that suggested she'd seen things others chose to ignore. We met at a 24-hour diner in Wicker Park, the kind of place where late-night conversations about UFOs and government cover-ups blended seamlessly with the ambient noise of clinking coffee cups and sizzling bacon. "You're asking the right questions," she said, sliding a manila folder across the sticky table. "But you're asking them 8 months too late." 9:23 a.m. For Leah Knox, at @checonspiracy_K, has been documenting the map phenomenon since February. Her files are extensive and deeply disturbing. Photos of 23 different encounters, all showing the same figure proportions, same vintage clothing, same impossible timing. Leah's photographs were sharper than the security footage I'd been analyzing, taken with professional equipment from carefully concealed positions. She'd documented encounters across Chicago's South Side, West Loop, even as far out as Oak Park. Each image showed the same unsettling scene: impossibly tall figures in anachronistic clothing, extending hand-drawn maps to carefully selected targets. "Notice anything about the timing?" Leah asked, pulling out a spreadsheet that would have impressed any data analyst. I studied her timeline. Every encounter occurred at 11:47 a.m., 3:23 p.m., or 7:15 p.m. No exceptions. "Those aren't random times," I muttered, checking my own notes. "Exactly. And they're not Chicago times either." 9:45 a.m. 5/The encounter times correspond to specific moments when Chicago's official city grid aligns with some other geographic system. Leah calls them void coordinates, places that exist in city records but not in physical reality. Leah opened her laptop, showing me a digital overlay of Chicago's official street grid against satellite imagery. Red dots marked locations where city planning documents indicated intersections, buildings, or landmarks that simply weren't there when viewed from above. The city's been built around empty spaces, she explained, zooming in on the intersection Harold's map had marked. Look at this, Lower Wacker and Columbus. Traffic reports reference it. GPS systems route around it. But when you actually look, the satellite view showed nothing but an irregular patch of shadows that didn't correspond to any visible structures. 10:12 a.m. 6/confirmed. Chicago has 47 void coordinates, intersections that exist on paper but not in reality. Every missing person received a map leading to one of these locations. Harold's X marks the biggest one, a 4-block area that shouldn't exist. I've tried to get close to these coordinates, Leah continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. But something stops you. Not physically, mentally. Your brain just refuses to process what you're seeing. Like there's a blind spot built into human perception. My hands were shaking as I copied her coordinates into my notebook. 47 locations across Chicago where reality seemed to have developed gaps, and someone, or something, was systematically guiding people to discover them. 10:34 a.m. 7/emergency alert just repeated, but this time I caught something new in the background static. Playing it back now, it's not random noise. It's coordinates. The same void coordinates Leah documented. 10:37 a.m. 8/. The alerts aren't warnings. They're instructions. Someone's broadcasting the coordinates of Chicago's empty spaces, and the map givers are the delivery system. But why? What's the purpose? Leah leaned forward, her eyes reflecting a fear I was beginning to understand. I think Chicago was built wrong. Like, fundamentally wrong. The maps show how it was supposed to be laid out, before something went sideways with the city planning. She pulled out another folder, this one containing photocopied documents from the Chicago Historical Society. City plans from the 1800s, architectural surveys, even old railroad maps. All showed a Chicago that looked nothing like the city we knew. Look at the original Burnham plan, she said, pointing to a 1909 document. These void coordinates? They're marked as reserved spaces in the original city layout. Reserved for what? Nobody knows. The documentation stops in 1910. 11:15 a.m. 9/historical documents show Chicago's void coordinates were intentionally planned as reserved spaces in the original city layout. After 1910, all references to their purpose disappear from city records. Cover up or catastrophe? My phone rang. Detective Scarlett went again. Mr. Penn, I'm calling to inform you that your investigation is interfering with an ongoing police matter. I strongly suggest you cease all related activities immediately. What kind of police matter requires covering up missing persons cases? A long pause. The kind that's above your clearance level. 11:42 a.m. 10/CPD detective admits my investigation is interfering with an ongoing police matter above my clearance level. Since when do local police have clearance levels? Federal involvement confirmed. Leah was watching my face as I hung up. They've been monitoring you since yesterday. Probably listening to this conversation too. She pulled out a small electronic device, some kind of signal detector. It was beeping steadily. Your phone's been compromised. They know everywhere you go, everyone you talk to. I stared at my phone, the device I'd used to document everything, now revealed as a tracking beacon. How long have you known? Since the moment you posted that first thread. But here's the thing, I don't think they want to stop you. I think they want to guide you. Just like the maps. 12:23 p.m. 11/ my phone's been compromised. Federal surveillance confirmed. But at @conspiracy_k thinks they want me to continue investigating. Question is, am I documenting a story or am I being recruited? The diner suddenly felt too small, too exposed. Other customers who'd seemed like typical Chicago residents moments before now appeared to be watching us with unusual interest. A businessman at the counter hadn't touched his coffee in 20 minutes. A woman by the window kept glancing at our table while pretending to read. We need to leave, Leah whispered. But first, you need to see this. She slid one final photograph across the table. It showed my apartment building, taken from street level. Standing on the sidewalk directly in front of my entrance was a tall figure in a vintage coat, holding what appeared to be a hand-drawn map. The timestamp read yesterday, 2:15 p.m., exactly when I'd spotted the figure on Michigan Avenue. 12:45 p.m. 12/ they know where I live. Photo evidence of map giver outside my building yesterday while I was downtown. This isn't random recruitment, it's targeted surveillance. They've been tracking me since I started investigating. That's not the worst part, Leah said, pointing to a detail I'd missed. In the photograph's background, barely visible in my apartment window, was a silhouette. Someone had been inside my apartment while I was out. The maps aren't just leading people to void coordinates, she continued. They're leading them home. Your home. Everyone who's disappeared, their maps were customized to their personal geography. Harold's map marked his favorite park. Jennifer's showed Navy Pier, where she took her kids every weekend. Marcus's included his exact route to campus. 1:07 p.m. 13/ the maps are personalized. Each victim received directions to places meaningful to them, with void coordinates integrated into their familiar geography. It's not random recruitment, it's psychological profiling. As we left the diner, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. For just a moment, I looked different, taller, moving with that same underwater precision I'd observed in the security footage. But when I blinked, I was myself again. Leah, I said, my voice barely audible above the street noise. What happens to the people who follow the maps? She stopped walking, her face pale in the October sunlight. I don't know, but I think we're about to find out. 1:34 p.m. 14/ thread paused for security reasons. Meeting with @ChiConspiracy_LK revealed surveillance, federal involvement, and personalized targeting. The maps aren't just leading to nothing, they're leading to us. Investigation continues offline. In my pocket, my compromised phone buzzed with an unknown number. The text message contained no words, just coordinates. When I looked them up, they marked the exact location where Leah and I were standing. 2:47 p.m. New phone, new carrier, same questions. If you're reading this thread, screenshot everything. Something tells me these posts won't stay visible for long. I ditched my compromised phone in a Loop District dumpster, paying cash for a burner at one of those electronics shops that doesn't ask questions. The paranoia felt justified when my original Twitter account started showing signs of interference. Tweets disappearing, followers vanishing, DMs arriving from accounts that claimed they'd never sent them. Whatever Leah had gotten me into, it was bigger than missing persons cases. 3:15 p.m. 2/ burner phone, new account. Old posts being scrubbed in real time. Whoever's running this operation has serious digital reach. Federal? Corporate? Something else entirely? The safe house Leah brought me to was exactly what I'd expected from a conspiracy theorist's hideout. Converted warehouse space in Pilsen, walls covered with maps, photographs, and connecting strings that looked like the work of a beautiful mind gone sideways. But the equipment was professional grade: signal jammers, encrypted communication devices, surveillance detection gear that belonged in a spy movie. "You're handling this better than most," Leah said, watching me process the controlled chaos of her operation. "Usually people break around the time they realize their phones are compromised. I'm a journalist. Surveillance comes with the territory." But even as I said it, I felt the familiar weight of being watched, the prickle between shoulder blades that meant unfriendly eyes tracking your movement. 3:33 p.m. 3/ Leah's operation is more sophisticated than expected. Professional surveillance equipment, encrypted communications, digital forensics setup. This isn't amateur hour conspiracy theory, it's counterintelligence. "Show me the progression," I said, gesturing at her wall-mounted timeline. She walked me through 8 months of documentation, starting with a single photograph of a tall figure near Grant Park. February 15th, 11:47 a.m. First confirmed sighting. I was photographing the Buckingham Fountain restoration when I noticed someone standing perfectly still while everyone else moved around them. The photograph showed exactly what she'd described: a figure in anachronistic clothing, motionless among flowing pedestrian traffic like a rock in a stream. But it was the next photo in the sequence that made my skin crawl. Same location, same time, 1 week later. Different clothes, different pose, but exact same height, same proportions, same impossible stillness. 3:51 p.m. Pattern analysis reveals something unsettling. The map givers aren't just consistent in appearance, they're identical. Same height, proportions, movement patterns. Different clothes, but same underlying physical structure. You think it's the same person? I think it's the same thing. Leah pulled out a magnifying glass, directing my attention to details I'd missed. Look at the shadow angles. These photos were taken at different times of day, different seasons, but the shadows fall identically. It's like they don't interact with light the way normal objects do. My burner phone rang. Unknown number, just like the text I'd received on the street. I almost didn't answer, but journalistic curiosity won out. Mr. Penn? This is Ezra Boone, Department of Homeland Security. I believe we need to talk. 4:07 p.m. 5/contact from DHS. Ezra Boone wants to meet. Either I've stumbled into something genuinely federal, or someone's very committed to this deception. Meeting arranged for Grant Park. Public location, broad daylight. Leah's signal detectors went haywire when I mentioned the call. They found your new number in 30 minutes. That's not normal law enforcement capability. What kind of capability is it? The kind that makes me think we're dealing with something that's been classified for a very long time. She handed me a digital recorder, the kind investigative journalists use for sensitive interviews. Whatever he tells you, get it on tape. But more importantly, pay attention to what he doesn't tell you. 4:32 p.m. 6/meeting with DHS contact in 30 minutes. At Conspiracy_case equipment is detecting increased electronic surveillance in the area. Someone's very interested in this conversation. Grant Park felt different at 5 p.m. on a Tuesday. Too quiet for downtown Chicago, with joggers and dog walkers moving in predictable patterns that seemed almost choreographed. I found Ezra Boone exactly where he'd said he'd be, near the Buckingham Fountain, wearing a gray suit that screamed federal employee and carrying a briefcase that probably cost more than my rent. Mr. Penn, thank you for meeting with me. His handshake was firm, his eye contact steady, but something about his timing felt off. Like he was speaking from a script he'd rehearsed. I understand you've been investigating the cartographic incidents. Is that what we're calling them? 5:18 p.m. 7/DHS calls them cartographic incidents. Ezra Boone confirms federal awareness, claims it's a classified security concern. Asked about missing persons. His answer, that's above your clearance level. Mr. Penn, I'm going to be direct with you. Your investigation is approaching information that could compromise ongoing operations. I'm authorized to offer you a choice. He opened his briefcase, revealing 2 folders. One was thin, maybe 20 pages. The other was thick enough to be a novel. Option 1, you accept a consulting contract with DHS. Full disclosure, federal protection, and a story that will make your career. Option 2, you walk away now, publish nothing, and forget this conversation ever happened. 5:35 p.m. 8/ offered DHS consulting contract with full disclosure. Alternative is walking away and forgetting everything. But here's the interesting part. He already knows about my contact with at Conspiracy_K. Mentioned her by name. Leah Knox has been a person of interest for several months, Boone continued, apparently reading my thoughts. Her documentation has been helpful to our investigation. You've been monitoring her too? We've been monitoring the situation. Ms. Knox, yourself, Detective Wynne, several others who've shown interest in the cartographic anomalies. It's a small community, Mr. Penn. The fountain behind us had stopped working, I realized. The water that should have been arcing through the air had simply ceased, leaving the mechanical apparatus running in silence. Other people in the park didn't seem to notice. 5:47 p.m. 9/Buckingham Fountain stopped working mid-conversation, but park visitors aren't reacting. Either massive coincidence or demonstration of capabilities. Boone's watching my reaction carefully. What exactly are the cartographic incidents? I asked, pulling out my recorder. You can't record this conversation, Mr. Penn. I hadn't turned the device on yet. Hadn't even touched the power button. Maps, he said simply. Hand-drawn maps that lead to coordinates that shouldn't exist. Distributed by individuals who don't match any known person in our databases. Recipients who disappear without leaving physical traces. And the government's role? Containment. The phenomenon has been active in Chicago since 1910. We've learned to manage it. 6:03 p.m. 10/1910. Same year city records stop mentioning the void coordinates. Boone confirms 115-year federal operation. Management rather than investigation. They're not trying to solve this, they're trying to control it. Management implies you understand what's happening. Boone glanced at his watch, though I noticed he didn't actually read the time. We understand enough. The entities distributing the maps serve a specific function in Chicago's urban ecosystem. Attempting to eliminate them has proven counterproductive. What kind of counterproductive? The kind that resulted in the Great Chicago Fire. The park was completely silent now. No traffic noise from the surrounding streets, no aircraft overhead, even the wind had stopped. Just Boone and myself in a bubble of unnatural quiet. 6:21 p.m. 11/Boone claims attempting to eliminate the map givers caused the Chicago Fire. Also, complete environmental silence during our conversation. No traffic, no wind, no ambient noise. This is not normal federal procedure. Mr. Penn, I need you to understand something. The maps aren't random, and they aren't malicious. They're corrective. Chicago was built incorrectly, over spaces that were meant to remain empty. The entities you're investigating are part of an ongoing correction process. Correction process that involves people disappearing. Correction process that prevents something much worse from happening to the city as a whole. He stood, briefcase clicking shut with a sound that seemed to echo impossibly long in the silent park. You have 24 hours to decide. Take the consulting contract or walk away. But Mr. Penn, 6:34 p.m. 12/24 hour deadline for decision. But Boone's parting comment is what's bothering me. The maps have already been customized for you specifically. The choice is whether you receive one knowingly or unknowingly. What did you mean about the maps being customized for me? Check your apartment when you get home. Look for anything that shouldn't be there. The park sounds returned all at once. Traffic, voices, fountain water arcing through the air as if it had never stopped. Boone was walking away, but his reflection in the fountain water looked wrong, stretched and distorted like the geography on the maps themselves. 6:52 p.m. 13/returning home to check apartment per Boone's suggestion. Environmental sounds returned to normal after he left. His reflection in fountain water showed impossible proportions. Starting to question what's real and what's performance. My apartment looked exactly as I'd left it, but felt completely different. Not the violation you'd expect from a break-in, more like walking into a place that had been precisely recreated from memory. Everything in the right location, but somehow not quite the right size or color or texture. On my dining room table, where I'd left the reconstructed map fragments, was a single piece of paper. Hand-drawn, showing the interior layout of my apartment building with impossible accuracy. My unit was marked with an X, and a dotted line extended from it through several floors, ending at a basement level that didn't exist in the building's blueprints. 7:15 p.m. 14/ found personalized map in apartment. Shows building layout with impossible accuracy, including basement level that doesn't exist in building plans. Dotted line leads from my unit to coordinates marked terminus point. The timestamp on my security camera showed no one entering my apartment. But the camera feed from 2:47 p.m., exactly when I'd posted my first tweet on the new account, showed my apartment empty except for a tall figure standing motionless in my living room, holding what appeared to be drawing materials. The figure wasn't breaking in. It was already inside, had been inside like it belonged there more than I did. 7:33 p.m. 15/security footage shows map giver inside apartment at 2:47 p.m. Same time I posted first tweet on new account. Didn't enter through door or window. Was simply present, like it had always been there. My burner phone displayed 17 missed calls from Detective Scarlett Wynn. When I finally answered, her voice was strained, urgent. Mr. Penn, I need you to listen carefully. Do not follow any maps. Do not go to any coordinates. Do not meet with anyone else claiming to investigate this phenomenon. Why? What's changed? We've lost contact with 3 other journalists in the past 6 hours. Chicago Tribune, Sun-Times, and a freelancer like yourself. All were investigating the same story. 7:51 p.m. 16/Detective Wynn reports 3 missing journalists, all investigating map phenomenon. Lost contact in past 6 hours. Timing coincides with my DHS meeting and discovery of personalized map. Detective, you've been dismissing these cases for weeks. What changed? What changed is that this morning we found their apartments. Empty. Not cleaned out, empty. Like no one had ever lived there. But their landlords remember them. Their editors remember them. Their families remember them. They existed, but now they don't. Through my apartment window, I could see a tall figure standing on the sidewalk across the street. It wasn't moving, wasn't watching the building, just standing in that same impossible stillness I'd documented in photographs. But this time, it was holding a map obviously meant for me. 8:12 p.m. 17/map giver visible outside building. Detective reports missing journalists' apartments are empty like no one had ever lived there, despite everyone remembering them. Existence without physical traces. There's something else, Detective Wynne continued. The DHS agent you met with today, Ezra Boone, no one by that name works for Homeland Security. We checked. No record of him in any federal database. Then who did I talk to? That's what we're trying to figure out. But Mr. Penn, whatever's happening in Chicago, it's accelerating. More encounters, more disappearances, more impossible maps. And every person who investigates deeply enough gets their own personalized invitation. 8:29 p.m. 18/Ezra Boone doesn't exist in federal databases. Detective Wynne confirms no DHS agent by that name. Who did I spend an hour talking to in Grant Park? What kind of entity can impersonate federal authority so convincingly? The figure across the street began walking toward my building. Not hurrying, not cautious, just moving with that underwater precision I'd become familiar with. In its hands, the map caught streetlight like it was made of something other than paper. I had a choice to make: barricade myself in the apartment and wait for whatever came next, or go down to street level and confront the thing that had been tracking me since I started this investigation. 8:44 p.m. 19/decision time. Map giver approaching building. Can barricade myself inside and wait, or confront directly. Either way, the choice feels like it was made for me before I was aware I was making it. But as I watched the figure cross the street, I realized the choice had already been made. The dotted line on my personalized map didn't end at the building's non-existent basement. It continued through the floor, through the earth beneath Chicago, connecting to a network of lines that extended far beyond the city limits. I wasn't being recruited by the map givers. I was being integrated into the map itself. 9:07 p.m. 20/understanding. I'm not being recruited by map givers. I'm being integrated into the map system itself. The investigation was never separate from the phenomenon. It was part of it. Thread continues tomorrow, assuming tomorrow exists. The doorbell rang exactly once. 9:08 p.m. Going downstairs. If these posts stop updating, you'll know why. Screenshots recommended. Whatever happens next, someone needs to document it. The elevator descended too slowly, each floor marker lighting up with a soft ding that sounded wrong in the building's unnatural quiet. My neighbors' apartments, usually alive with television noise and dinner conversations, were silent behind their doors. Even Mrs. Chen's perpetually barking terrier had gone mute. The building felt evacuated, though I could see lights behind door peepholes and shadows moving across threshold gaps. 9:11 p.m. 2/building is silent but occupied. Neighbors present but not making normal sounds. Like everyone's holding their breath, waiting for something to finish. The lobby's fluorescent lighting flickered in patterns that reminded me of Morse code, but before I could decode the rhythm, the front door opened with a pneumatic hiss that our building's ancient hardware had never produced. The figure stepped inside, and I got my first clear look at one of Chicago's map givers. Tall, exactly as every witness had described, but the proportions were wrong in ways that made my eyes water. Arms too long for the torso, legs that seemed to bend at additional joints, a neck that extended just slightly beyond human possibility. The vintage clothing, a wool coat that belonged in the 1940s, polished shoes that reflected light like mirrors, fit perfectly, as if tailored for anatomy that didn't quite match our species. 9:14 p.m. 3/direct visual contact with map giver. Human adjacent but wrong proportions. Vintage clothing fits perfectly despite anatomical differences. Movement suggests additional joint articulation. Mr. Penn. The voice was measured, each syllable given identical weight and duration. Not robotic, but deliberately paced, like speech learned from recordings rather than conversation. I have been commissioned to provide you with navigation assistance. It extended the map with movements that flowed like water, each gesture transitioning seamlessly into the next without the small pauses and adjustments that characterize human motion. The paper was aged yellow, edges soft with handling, but the ink looked wet despite obviously being dry. 9:17 p.m. 4/map giver speaks with measured cadence, identical syllable timing. Claims to be commissioned to provide navigation assistance. Hand-drawn map appears freshly inked despite aged paper. Who commissioned you? The original cartographers of this metropolitan area. The survey was incomplete when construction began. Corrections have been ongoing since 1871, the year of the Great Chicago Fire. I thought about Ezra Boone's claim that attempting to eliminate the map givers had caused the disaster. What kind of corrections? Spatial adjustments to accommodate original intentions. Your current residential coordinates conflict with designated void space. Relocation is recommended. 9:21 p.m. 5/ claims to represent original cartographers making spatial adjustments since 1871. My apartment conflicts with designated void space. Chicago fire connection becoming clearer. I stared at the map in its hands. My building was drawn with architectural accuracy that surpassed the original blueprints, showing internal details like pipe routing and electrical systems that weren't visible from external observation. But surrounding structures were rendered in impossible geometries, buildings folding into themselves, streets that curved through dimensions that hurt to contemplate. The map shows Chicago differently than it actually exists. The map shows Chicago as it was surveyed before human intervention. Current configuration represents unauthorized construction over designated empty areas. 9:25 p.m. 6/map shows Chicago's original survey before human intervention. Current city represents unauthorized construction over designated empty areas. We built Chicago wrong, and something's been trying to fix it for 150 plus years. The lobby around us began to shift, not physically but perceptually. Walls that had been painted beige became exposed brick, then wooden paneling, then something that looked like living tissue. The fluorescent fixtures transformed into gas lamps, then oil lanterns, then bioluminescent growths that pulsed with organic rhythm. Only the map giver remained constant, a fixed point while reality flickered between possibilities. What are you? I whispered. I am a function of the correction process. Individual identity is not relevant to cartographic accuracy. 9:29 p.m. 7/lobby environment shifting between architectural periods and organic structures. Map giver claims to be a function of the correction process without individual identity. Reality becoming unstable around direct contact. The other people who received maps, Harold, Jennifer, Marcus, where are they? They have been relocated to coordinates consistent with original survey intentions. Their residential conflicts have been resolved. Are they alive? The map giver paused, head tilting with mechanical precision. Life and death are human categorical distinctions. Relocated individuals continue to exist within the corrected spatial framework. 9:33 p.m. 8/ missing persons described as relocated to coordinates consistent with original survey. Claims they continue to exist within corrected spatial framework. Life/death described as human categorical distinctions. I pulled out my phone to photograph the map, but the camera showed only static. The map giver watched my failed attempt with what might have been curiosity. Documentation is unnecessary. Your participation in the correction process will be recorded through alternative methods. What if I refuse the map? Refusal extends the correction timeline, but does not prevent spatial adjustment. Voluntary participation reduces individual discomfort during relocation. 9:37 p.m. 9/can't photograph map, camera shows static. Refusal extends correction timeline but doesn't prevent spatial adjustment. Voluntary participation reduces individual discomfort during relocation. This isn't recruitment, it's inevitable. The building around us continued its architectural evolution, cycling through Chicago's historical periods with increasing speed. I caught glimpses of the city's original swampland, then native settlements, then something older, geometric structures that predated human habitation by geological ages. The map giver remained motionless through every transition, like an anchor point in temporal flux. How long has this been happening? Spatial corrections began with the first unauthorized construction. Chicago represents the most significant deviation from original cartographic intentions. Other metropolitan areas require minimal intervention. 9:42 p.m. 10/Chicago is the most significant deviation from original cartographic intentions. Other cities require minimal intervention. We're not dealing with a local phenomenon. This is global cartographic management. I looked at the map again, focusing on details I'd missed. The dotted line from my apartment didn't end at coordinates in Chicago. It continued beyond the city limits, connecting to similar lines from other metropolitan areas across North America. A vast network of corrections, with Chicago as the primary node. What happens if I take the map? You will be provided with navigation to your corrected coordinates. The transition process involves temporary spatial displacement followed by integration into the adjusted framework. And if I don't take it? The correction will proceed according to extended timeline protocols. Your current coordinates will be adjusted whether you participate voluntarily or not. 9:46 p.m. 11/map shows network extending beyond Chicago to other metropolitan areas. Correction process is global with Chicago as primary node. Choice is between voluntary and involuntary spatial adjustment, not between participation and freedom. The lobby had cycled back to its original configuration, but now I could see the overlay, faint outlines of all the other architectural periods it had displayed, existing simultaneously in the same space. Chicago wasn't just built wrong, it was built in multiple conflicting versions, all occupying the same coordinates. The original cartographers, who were they? Entities tasked with spatial organization prior to human territorial expansion. The survey system predates current dominant species by significant temporal margins. 9:51 p.m. 12/original cartographers predate humans by significant temporal margins. We didn't build Chicago wrong. We built it over an existing spatial organization system managed by non-human entities. My phone buzzed with incoming calls, Detective Wynn, Leah, even numbers I didn't recognize. But when I answered, all I heard was static mixed with what sounded like voices speaking in measured cadences identical to the map giver's speech pattern. The correction process was communicating with itself through Chicago's phone networks. Are there others like you in the building? Correction functions are deployed as needed. Your neighbors receive their navigation assistance at appropriate intervals. You are the final residential unit requiring relocation from this coordinate set. 9:55 p.m. 13/ I'm the last resident in the building requiring relocation. Neighbors already received their maps. The building's silence isn't fear, it's completion. Everyone else has already been processed. I realized the true horror wasn't the map giver itself, but the systematic efficiency of the operation. Every missing person, every impossible map, every void coordinate. It was all part of a methodical correction process that had been running for over a century. Chicago's population was being quietly relocated according to spatial requirements we couldn't comprehend. What about the journalists who were investigating? The federal agents? Investigative personnel serve a function in the correction timeline. Documentation and official response protocols are components of the larger adjustment process. 9:59 p.m. 14/investigation itself is part of the correction process. Journalists, federal agents, even police response, all components of adjustment process. We weren't uncovering the conspiracy, we were participating in it. The map giver extended the paper again, closer to my hands. The ink seemed to move, redrawing details in real time to reflect my precise location and the exact time of our encounter. My apartment was no longer marked with an X. It was simply absent, erased from the building's floor plan like it had never existed. Mr. Penn, the correction timeline has reached completion for your residential coordinates. Navigation assistance is no longer optional. 10:03 p.m. 15/ my apartment erased from the building plan in real time. Navigation assistance no longer optional. Correction timeline reached completion. The choice I thought I was making has already been made. I took the map. The paper felt warm, alive, like skin. The moment my fingers made contact, the world around me began to dissolve, not dramatically but gradually, like waking from a dream. The lobby faded, my building became translucent, and Chicago's skyline shifted into configurations that matched the impossible geometries I'd been studying for days. 10:07 p.m. 16/ took the map. World dissolving gradually upon contact. Chicago's skyline shifting to match impossible geometries from collected maps. The correction isn't happening to the city. It's happening to perception of the city. Where am I going? You are transitioning to coordinates consistent with your spatial requirements within the corrected framework. The process will be completed according to established protocols. Will I still be me? You will continue to exist as a function within the corrected system. Individual identity parameters will be adjusted to facilitate integration. 10:11 p.m. 17/ individual identity parameters will be adjusted to facilitate integration. Not death, not disappearance, transformation into a function within the corrected system. Like the map giver itself, the dissolution accelerated. My hands holding the phone became translucent, and I could see through them to geometries that existed between the spaces Chicago occupied. The map giver was changing too, its vintage clothing shifting to match different historical periods, as if it contained multiples of itself from every era of the correction process. 10:15 p.m. 18/dissolution accelerating. Can see through hands to geometries between Chicago's spaces. Map giver shifting through historical periods. Contains multiples of itself from every correction era. The other investigators, will they become like you? All participants in the correction process serve appropriate functions. Documentation specialists maintain record-keeping responsibilities. Enforcement personnel manage compliance protocols. Spatial adjustment continues until metropolitan area achieves consistency with original survey. 10:19 p.m. 19/other investigators will serve appropriate functions, documentation, enforcement, compliance. Correction continues until Chicago achieves consistency with original survey. We're becoming components of the system we were investigating. My final clear thought as Grayson Penn was the realization that this Twitter thread would continue. Someone would keep posting updates, documenting the correction process from inside the system. My investigative instincts would persist, but serving the cartographers rather than exposing them. 10:23 p.m. 20/thread will continue. Documentation instincts persist, but serving cartographers rather than exposing them. Investigation and correction are the same process. See you on the other side of the map. The last thing I saw was Chicago's true geography, a city built according to spatial requirements that predated human understanding, with void coordinates serving as anchor points for realities that coexisted in the same metropolitan area. Beautiful, terrible, and absolutely correct. 10:27 p.m. 21/Chicago's true geography revealed. Void coordinates are anchor points for coexisting realities. The city is beautiful, terrible, and absolutely correct according to original specifications. Transition complete. 11:47 a.m. The map is wrong, but I'm following it anyway. Started at my building, coordinates match perfectly. But the first turn takes me down Randolph toward a street that shouldn't connect to Lower Wacker. 11:52 a.m. 2/GPS shows me walking through solid building foundations. Phone keeps recalculating route, giving error messages about invalid pathway data. Map shows clear passage where city planning says there's a parking garage. The alley materialized between two skyscrapers that had been flush against each other when I'd walked this route yesterday. Not new construction. The weathered brick suggested decades of existence, complete with accumulated grime and faded graffiti in languages I couldn't identify. My shadow fell across symbols carved into the pavement, geometric patterns that seemed to shift when viewed peripherally. 11:58 a.m. 3/alley exists between buildings that were adjacent yesterday. Weathered brick, old graffiti in unknown languages. Carved pavement symbols shift in peripheral vision. Architecture rearranging to match map, rather than map showing existing streets. The passage led to a courtyard that occupied space where three different buildings should have intersected. Victorian-era lampposts illuminated cobblestones that belonged to a century Chicago had supposedly left behind, while fire escapes zigzagged up walls constructed from materials I'd never seen. Something between brick and organic tissue that seemed to breathe with subtle expansion and contraction. 12:03 p.m. Courtyard exists where three buildings should intersect. Victorian lampposts, breathing walls made of brick organic hybrid material. Chicago's architectural periods layered in same coordinates. Time isn't linear here. My phone buzzed with location alerts from Detective Wynn and Agent Boone. They were tracking my movements through the city's surveillance network. But their GPS coordinates showed me standing in the middle of solid architecture, while their messages became increasingly frantic about losing visual confirmation despite satellite tracking, showing my exact position. 12:09 p.m. 5/Wynn and Boone tracking via surveillance network. Their GPS shows me inside solid buildings while they lose visual confirmation. Satellite tracking functions, but human observation fails. Different detection methods, seeing different realities. Scarlet__CPD, Grayson, stop moving. Stay exactly where you are. Do not follow that map any further. Easy_Boone_H, Mr. Penn, you're approaching a classified area. Federal agents are en route to your location for immediate extraction. 12:14 p.m. 6/official responses escalating. Federal extraction team deployed. My exact location somehow classified, despite being downtown Chicago. They know what the maps lead to, and they're trying to prevent me from reaching the destination. The map's ink seemed to darken as I followed its route, lines becoming more defined while new details emerged in real time. Side streets appeared as I needed them, Building entrances opened to corridors that connected across impossible distances, and stairwells descended into basement levels that extended far below Chicago's documented underground infrastructure. 12:21 p.m. 7/map updating in real time, new passages appearing as needed. Building interiors connect across impossible distances. Basement levels extend below documented underground. Map isn't showing routes, it's creating them. Lee_Knox_truth. Private message. Don't trust their extraction. The void coordinates reveal Chicago's original blueprint, before it was built over something else. The 1871 fire wasn't accidental. It was the first attempt to eliminate the correction process. I paused in a stairwell that descended between floors of a building I'd entered from street level, but which now extended both upward and downward beyond architectural possibility. The walls were lined with photographs dating back to Chicago's founding, but the images showed different versions of the city. Streets that curved through dimensions my eyes couldn't quite follow, buildings that existed in multiple time periods simultaneously. 12:28 p.m. 8/ Stairwell extends beyond buildings' architectural limits. Historical photographs show Chicago versions with impossible street curves and multi-temporal buildings. Every floor exists in different period of city's development. The photographs began moving as I watched, subtle animation that showed the same locations transitioning through various states of existence. Chicago's downtown area flickered between swampland, native settlements, early colonial construction, and something older, geometric structures that predated human habitation by geological time frames. The correction process hadn't begun with the Great Fire. It had been ongoing since before Chicago existed. 12:35 p.m. 9/photographs animate, showing location transitions through historical periods and pre-human geometric structures. Correction process predates Chicago's founding. The city was built over an existing spatial organization system. I reached what the map designated as sublevel -7, though the building I'd entered had no basement levels according to public records. The corridor stretched impossibly far in both directions, lined with doors that bore no identifying numbers or signs. Behind each door, I could hear sounds that belonged to different eras: typewriter keys, rotary phone rings, television static, and underneath it all, the measured cadences of voices speaking in perfect synchronization. 12:42 p.m. 10/sublevel -7 in building with no documented basement. Infinite corridor with numberless doors. Sounds from different time periods behind each door, plus synchronized voices with measured cadences. Previous map recipients are here. Scarlet_CPD, Grayson, federal assets are in position. Exit the building immediately through the nearest street-level door. Do not proceed to the coordinates marked on your map. Easy_boon_hs. Mr. Penn, you are entering a spatial anomaly zone. Continued movement risks permanent displacement from baseline reality coordinates. 12:48 p.m. 11/official warnings about spatial anomaly zone and permanent displacement from baseline reality coordinates. They're not trying to protect me, they're trying to protect their ability to manage the correction process. The map's destination was marked at the corridor's end, where a door bore the only visible identifier, a symbol that matched the geometric patterns carved into the courtyard pavement. As I approached, the door opened without physical contact, revealing a construction site that couldn't exist, an excavation that descended into darkness below Chicago's documented geological foundations. 12:55 p.m. 12/destination door opens without contact, revealing construction site with excavation below documented geological foundations. Construction site that couldn't exist according to city planning records. This is where the map has been leading. The construction site was active despite being located impossibly deep beneath the city. Workers in period clothing from various decades operated equipment that ranged from 19th century hand tools to machinery I didn't recognize, all focused on expanding the excavation downward. The workers moved with fluid coordination, never speaking, their actions synchronized like components of a larger mechanism. 1:03 p.m. 13/active construction site with workers from multiple time periods using tools from different eras. Synchronized movement without communication. Excavation expanding downward beyond geological possibility. Workers are components of larger mechanism. I recognize some of the workers, the elderly man from Millennium Park, the young mother from Navy Pier, others whose faces I'd seen in missing person reports. They acknowledged my presence with brief nods before returning to their tasks, expressions vacant but purposeful. None of them seemed distressed or confused. They worked with the focused intensity of people performing essential tasks. 1:10 p.m. 14/missing persons working at construction site. Vacant but purposeful expressions, focused on essential tasks. Not distressed or confused, functioning as intended within the system. Map recipients become part of correction workforce. The excavation revealed layers of Chicago's hidden history. Foundations of buildings that had never appeared on official records, street systems that followed different geometric principles, and at the deepest visible level, structures composed of materials that seemed to exist between solid and liquid states. The correction process wasn't destroying Chicago. It was revealing the city that had always existed beneath human construction. 1:17 p.m. 15/excavation reveals Chicago's hidden layers. Unofficial building foundations, alternative street systems, structures made of materials between solid and liquid states. Correction process revealing pre-existing city beneath human construction. Lee_Knox_truth. Private message. The void coordinates aren't empty spaces. They're access points to Chicago's original configuration. The map givers are maintaining portals between the surface city and the foundational layer. You're seeing the infrastructure. The construction noise around me began to synchronize, equipment operating in rhythmic patterns that created complex harmonics. The sound wasn't random industrial noise. It was communication, information being transmitted through acoustic frequencies that bypassed human speech. The workers were coordinating through sonic pulses that felt like language processed directly by the nervous system. 1:25 p.m. 16/construction noise synchronizing into communication frequencies. Workers coordinating through sonic pulses that bypass human speech, processed directly by nervous system. Infrastructure maintenance through nonverbal information transmission. I pulled out my phone to document the excavation, but the camera showed only the empty lot that should have occupied these coordinates according to surface-level Chicago. The construction site existed in spatial dimensions that digital recording couldn't capture, like looking at a photograph of a mirror and seeing only the wall behind it. 1:32 p.m. 17/camera shows empty lot instead of construction site. Excavation exists in spatial dimensions digital recording can't capture. Surface Chicago and foundational Chicago occupy same coordinates in different dimensional layers. The map in my hands began changing again, lines redrawing themselves to show my current position within the construction site's layout. New pathways appeared, leading deeper into the excavation toward areas marked with symbols that hurt to look at directly. The destination coordinates were no longer at ground level. They extended downward through layers of Chicago that existed in architectural periods spanning centuries. 1:39 p.m. 18/map updating to show construction site layout, pathways leading deeper through architectural layers spanning centuries. Destination coordinates extend downward through multiple Chicago time periods. I meant to go deeper. Scarlet_Win_CPD. Final warning. Tactical units are breaching the building. Comply with federal extraction or face detention under national security provisions. Easy_Boon_HS. Mr. Penn, you have 30 seconds to exit the anomaly zone before we implement containment protocols. This is not negotiable. 1:46 p.m. 19/tactical units breaching building, containment protocols threatened. 30-second deadline for extraction. They're willing to use force to prevent me from reaching deeper construction levels. What are they protecting? The workers around me stopped their tasks simultaneously, turning to face the excavation's upper levels, where I could hear boots on metal stairs and radio chatter echoing through the vertical space. The missing persons who had become construction workers moved with coordinated precision toward concealed positions, their synchronized movements suggesting practiced response to external interference. 1:53 p.m. 20/workers stopped simultaneously, moved to concealed positions with practiced coordination. Missing persons now function as security for construction site. They're protecting the correction process from government interference. One of the workers, a businessman I recognized from downtown disappearance reports, approached and handed me a hard hat and safety vest that appeared to be cut from the same material as the map. When I put them on, the excavation's geometry became clearer, revealing structural details that had been invisible moments before. The construction site extended not just downward but outward, connecting to similar excavations beneath other Chicago locations. 2:01 p.m. 21/safety equipment made from map material reveals hidden excavation geometry. Construction extends outward to similar sites beneath other Chicago locations. Network of connected excavations throughout city's foundational layer. The tactical teams reached the construction site level, but their equipment couldn't detect the workers who had moved to concealed positions. Through their radio chatter, I heard confusion about negative visual on target and coordinates show empty construction zone, despite standing in the middle of active excavation. They existed in surface-level Chicago while the construction operated in foundational layer. 2:08 p.m. 22/tactical teams can't detect workers or active construction. Radio chatter describes empty construction zone while standing in active excavation. Government forces limited to surface-level Chicago interaction. The businessman who had given me the safety equipment gestured toward a freight elevator that descended beyond the reach of the tactical team's lights. His expression remained vacant, but his movements conveyed urgency, not fear, but operational necessity to continue the correction process. The elevator would take me to levels where government interference couldn't penetrate. 2:15 p.m. 23/freight elevator descends beyond tactical team's detection range. Worker shows urgency about operational necessity to continue correction process. Deeper levels exist beyond government interference capability. As I approached the elevator, my phone lost all signal strength. Not network failure, but spatial displacement beyond communication infrastructure coverage. The last message I could send would be this final update before descending to Chicago's foundational levels, where map coordinates led to construction that had been ongoing since before the city's official founding. 2:22 p.m. 24/signal lost due to spatial displacement beyond communication infrastructure. Descending to foundational levels where construction predates city's official founding. This is my last update from surface-accessible coordinates. The elevator doors closed with the sound of settling earth, and I began my descent toward the coordinates marked on my map. Not an empty lot, but the administrative center of Chicago's correction process, where the original cartographers maintained their spatial organization system. The investigation was ending, but my participation in the correction was just beginning. 2:29 p.m. 25/descent begun toward administrative center of correction process. Original cartographers maintained spatial organization system at foundational level. Investigation ending, participation in correction beginning. See you in the infrastructure. 2:47 p.m. Elevator stopped. Level indicator shows symbols instead of numbers. Door opening 2. I need new words for what I'm seeing. Chicago exists here but not here. The elevator opened onto a platform suspended over an expanse that my mind kept trying to categorize as empty space, but emptiness implied the absence of something. This was presence without content, a fullness that contained nothing while remaining absolutely, tangibly there. The construction site's excavation had revealed not a cavity, but an entrance to space that existed adjacent to physical reality. 2:52 p.m. 2/platform suspended over expanse that isn't empty space. Its presence without content. Fullness containing nothing but tangibly there. Excavation revealed entrance to space adjacent to physical reality. Nothing is a place, not an absence. Other platforms extended across the void at various heights and distances, connected by bridges that spanned impossible intervals without visible support structures. On each platform, I could see figures, some in construction equipment, others in civilian clothing, all moving with the same purposeful coordination I'd observed at the excavation site above. 2:58 p.m. 3/multiple platforms connected by unsupported bridges across impossible distances. Figures on each platform moving with coordinated purpose. Construction and civilian personnel integrated into unified operation. Void space as infrastructure. The businessman who had given me the safety equipment gestured toward the nearest bridge. As I stepped onto it, the surface felt solid despite appearing to be constructed from the same nothing that filled the surrounding space. Each footstep produced a sound like settling earth, and I realized the bridges weren't built. They were condensed void, nothing compressed into functional form. 3:05 p.m. For bridges constructed from condensed void, nothing compressed into functional form. Footsteps produce settling earth sounds. Infrastructure built from absence rather than materials. Void space can be shaped and utilized. Transmission intercepted. Federal Asset Alpha 7 to command. Target has descended beyond scanning range. Recommend immediate implementation of protocol blackout. Spatial distortion increasing at excavation coordinates. Transmission intercepted. Command to Alpha 7. Negative on protocol blackout. Maintain perimeter. Do not enter anomaly zone. Repeat, do not enter. 3:12 p.m. 5/Federal communications intercepted. Protocol blackout exists but denied. Spatial distortion increasing at excavation coordinates. Government assets forbidden from entering anomaly zone. They know what happens to people who enter void space. The void around the platform network wasn't silent. It hummed with activity that bypassed auditory processing, information transmitted through frequencies that affected perception directly. The sound resembled the construction site's synchronized equipment, but more complex, like a city-sized machine operating at the threshold of human sensory capacity. 3:19 p.m. 6/Void hums with activity bypassing auditory processing. City-sized machine operating at threshold of human sensory capacity. Information transmitted through perception-affecting frequencies. Void space is active infrastructure, not empty territory. As I crossed the bridge toward the central platform, figures on adjacent structures turned to observe my progress. I recognized faces from missing person reports spanning decades. Harold Vance, the elderly man from Millennium Park, but also people whose disappearances predated my investigation by years. All wore expressions of focused concentration, like workers performing critical tasks requiring complete attention. 3:26 p.m. 7/Figures from missing person reports spanning decades, all present. Harold Vance and people missing for years, all focused on critical tasks. Missing persons integrated into long-term operation. Void space maintains continuity across time. The central platform contained what appeared to be an administrative center, desks, filing systems, and communication equipment that combined technologies from different historical periods. Some personnel operated manual typewriters, while others worked with devices I couldn't identify, all components of an information processing system that integrated across temporal boundaries. 3:33 p.m. 8/ Administrative center combining technologies from different historical periods. Manual typewriters and unidentifiable devices integrated into information processing system. Personnel from different eras working unified operation. Void space administration transcends time. Harold Vance approached, his movements fluid and purposeful compared to the confused elderly man I'd seen in witness reports. His eyes remained recognizably human, but held knowledge that seemed to extend beyond individual experience, like accessing information stored in the void space itself rather than personal memory. "Mr. Penn," he said, using the same measured cadence as the map giver. "Your documentation responsibilities will be assigned according to operational requirements. Individual identity parameters have been preserved to maintain investigative function." 3:40 p.m. 9/ Harold Vance approaches with fluid, purposeful movement. Eyes human, but holding knowledge beyond individual experience. Same measured cadence as map giver. Individual identity preserved to maintain investigative function. "I'm here to document from inside." "What is this place?" "Administrative Center for Spatial Correction Operations." Chicago's surface configuration conflicts with original cartographic specifications. Void coordinates provide access to foundational infrastructure necessary for metropolitan area management. 3:47 p.m. 10/ Administrative Center for Spatial Correction Operations. Chicago's surface conflicts with original cartographic specifications. Void coordinates provide foundational infrastructure access. Missing persons become correction administration personnel. He led me to a desk equipped with communication devices that appeared to be receiving information from throughout Chicago's surface area. Multiple screens displayed real-time data about population movement, structural modifications, and what were labeled as spatial compliance metrics. The correction process wasn't random. It was systematic management of an entire metropolitan area. 3:54 p.m. 11/ Communication devices receiving real-time Chicago surface data. Population movement, structural modifications, spatial compliance metrics. Correction process is systematic metropolitan area management. Missing persons monitor and adjust surface city. The people who disappeared, are they still themselves? Individual identity functions are maintained within operational parameters. Personal memories and psychological structures remain intact while integration with correction infrastructure provides enhanced access to spatial information. 4:01 p.m. 12/individual identity, maintained within operational parameters. Personal memories and psychology intact, but enhanced access to spatial information through infrastructure integration. Not replacement, augmentation for correction work. Transmission intercepted, Detective Wynn to command. Recommend initiating containment protocol. Spatial distortions expanding beyond original coordinates. Multiple civilian reports of architectural anomalies throughout downtown. Transmission intercepted. Command to Detective Wynn. Maintain current perimeter. Do not escalate. Anomaly expansion is within acceptable parameters. 4:08 p.m. 13/spatial distortions expanding beyond original coordinates. Multiple civilian reports of architectural anomalies downtown. Government considers expansion within acceptable parameters. They're managing this, not fighting it. Harold guided me to a workstation where other personnel were processing incoming reports from throughout Chicago. The screens showed real-time mapping of the city, but the geography shifted constantly. Streets realigning, buildings relocating, entire neighborhoods transitioning between architectural periods as surface reality adjusted to match foundational specifications. 4:15 p.m. 14/real-time mapping shows Chicago geography shifting constantly. Streets realigning, buildings relocating, neighborhoods transitioning between architectural periods. Surface reality adjusting to match foundational specifications. City correcting itself. The missing persons, Jennifer, Marcus, the others, where are they? Distributed throughout correction infrastructure according to individual capabilities. Documentation specialists maintain administrative functions. Engineering personnel manage structural adjustments. Enforcement units coordinate with surface authorities. 4:22 p.m. 15/missing persons distributed according to capabilities. Documentation, engineering, enforcement units. Surface authorities coordinating with correction infrastructure. Police and federal agencies are partners, not opponents. The realization hit me like cognitive whiplash. Detective Wynn's dismissive responses, Agent Boone's carefully timed interventions, the federal government's knowledge of void coordinates. They weren't trying to stop the correction process. They were managing public awareness while facilitating systematic spatial adjustment. 4:29 p.m. 16/Detective Wynn and Agent Boone managing public awareness while facilitating spatial adjustment. Government partnering with correction process, not opposing it. Investigation wasn't uncovering conspiracy, it was recruitment process. My investigation, was it real? Documentation function serves correction process by maintaining public records of spatial adjustment. Individual investigative initiative demonstrates suitable psychological profile for administrative integration. Your work will continue with enhanced access to accurate information. 4:36 p.m. 17/investigation served correction process by maintaining public records. Investigative initiative demonstrates suitable psychological profile for administrative integration. Documentation work continues with enhanced information access. I was being evaluated. The workstation assigned to me contained files detailing every aspect of Chicago's correction timeline. Spatial adjustments dating back to the city's founding, coordination protocols between surface authorities and void space administration, and population management strategies that integrated missing persons reports with operational requirements. 4:43 p.m. 18/workstation files detail complete Chicago correction timeline from city's founding. Coordination protocols between surface authorities and void space administration. Population management integrating missing persons with operational requirements. Emergency alert system malfunction. Attention Chicago residents. Avoid strangers offering maps downtown. Report architectural anomalies immediately. Do not attempt to document spatial distortions. Comply with evacuation orders when issued. Emergency alert system malfunction. Previous alert contains inaccuracies. Architectural modifications are planned improvements. Citizen cooperation with municipal adjustments is appreciated. Documentation of improvements is encouraged. 4:50 p.m. 19/emergency alert system broadcasting contradictory messages. Warnings about strangers and maps followed by encouragement of citizen cooperation with municipal adjustments. Alert system compromised by correction process. The contradictory alerts weren't system malfunctions. They were evidence of competing information streams as Surface Chicago adjusted to foundational specifications. Some alerts originated from traditional emergency management systems, while others came from correction infrastructure attempting to manage public response to spatial modifications. 4:57 p.m. 20/contradictory alerts from competing information streams. Traditional emergency management versus correction infrastructure, managing public response to spatial modifications. Two different Chicago governments operating simultaneously. Harold returned with what appeared to be a badge or identification card constructed from the same void-compressed material as the bridges. Administrative access for documentation responsibilities, he explained. Individual identity preservation requires continued investigative function within correction framework. 5:04 p.m. 21/administrative access badge made from void-compressed material. Individual identity preservation requires continued investigative function within correction framework. I keep being me but serve different purpose. I looked at the badge, then at the screens showing Chicago's ongoing transformation. The city was being corrected according to specifications that predated human habitation, managed by missing persons who had been integrated into administrative infrastructure, coordinated by surface authorities who presented the process as security threats while facilitating systematic spatial adjustment. 5:11 p.m. 22/Chicago transforming according to pre-human specifications. Missing persons integrated into administration. Surface authorities presenting process as security threats while facilitating systematic adjustment. Complexity beyond conspiracy. What about the people who aren't chosen for maps? The rest of Chicago's population? Surface population continues normal activities within adjusted spatial framework. Most individuals do not perceive correction modifications. Spatial awareness varies according to individual psychological compatibility with foundational infrastructure. 5:18 p.m. 23/surface population continues normal activities within adjusted spatial framework. Most don't perceive corrections. Spatial awareness varies by psychological compatibility with foundational infrastructure. Only some people see the changes. The void space around us pulsed with increased activity as evening approached on the surface. Through the administrative center's monitoring systems, I could see Chicago's rush hour beginning. Millions of people navigating streets that had been subtly realigned, entering buildings that had been architecturally adjusted, following routes through a city that was simultaneously the Chicago they knew and the Chicago that had always existed beneath human construction. 5:25 p.m. 24/void space activity increases with surface evening rush hour. Millions navigating subtly realigned streets, adjusted buildings. City simultaneously familiar Chicago and foundational Chicago. Correction process invisible to most. I took the badge. The moment my fingers touched the void-compressed material, my perception expanded to encompass both surface Chicago and foundational infrastructure simultaneously. I could see the city as it existed for normal residents and as it functioned for correction operations. Two complete realities occupying the same coordinates through spatial organization systems beyond human understanding. 5:32 p.m. 25/badge contact expands perception to encompass surface and foundational Chicago simultaneously. Two complete realities occupying same coordinates through spatial organization beyond human understanding. I can see both versions of the city. My documentation responsibilities were clear now. Maintain public records of the correction process while serving administrative functions within void space infrastructure. The investigation would continue, but with access to complete information about Chicago's spatial adjustment and the systematic integration of psychologically compatible individuals into correction operations. 5:39 p.m. 26/documentation responsibilities clear. Maintain public records while serving administrative functions. Investigation continues with complete information access. Integration of psychologically compatible individuals into correction operations. The void space hummed with satisfaction as another documentation specialist joined the administrative infrastructure. Chicago's correction continued above and below, surface reality adjusting to foundational specifications while missing persons maintained operational continuity across temporal boundaries. The city was becoming what it had always been intended to be. 5:46 p.m. 27/void space hums with satisfaction. Chicago's correction continues above and below simultaneously. Missing persons maintain operational continuity. City becoming what it was always intended to be. Integration complete. Welcome to foundational Chicago. 6:03 p.m. The workstation assigned to me contained more than files. It contained memories. Not my memories, but impressions left by previous documentation specialists who had occupied this position. Each time I touched the void-compressed interface, I accessed fragments of their experiences across decades of correction operations. 6:10 p.m. 2/Chicago's foundational specifications weren't architectural blueprints. They were instructions for reality management. The city was never built on empty land. It was constructed over a network of void coordinates that existed before human habitation, before geological formation, before terrestrial physics. The screens around my workstation displayed what Harold called temporal cartography, maps showing Chicago across multiple time periods simultaneously. I could see the Great Fire of 1871 not as a historical disaster, but as a spatial correction event, burning away surface structures that conflicted with foundational coordinates. 6:17 p.m. 3/Great Fire of 1871 wasn't disaster. Spatial correction event burning surface structures conflicting with foundational coordinates. Chicago's major historical events were adjustment periods. City correcting itself throughout history. 6:24 p.m. 4/World's Fair of 1893 tested large-scale architectural integration with void space infrastructure. White City wasn't temporary exhibition, prototype for foundational Chicago. Fair buildings demolished because integration successful, specifications preserved for future implementation. The world's Columbian Exposition appeared on the temporal maps as a test phase for large-scale architectural integration with void space infrastructure. The famous White City wasn't a temporary exhibition, but a prototype for foundational Chicago. The fair buildings were demolished not because the exhibition ended, but because the integration was successful and the specifications were preserved for gradual implementation across the metropolitan area. 6:31 p.m. 5/ My enhanced perception revealed Chicago's current population at 2.7 million surface residents and approximately 847,000 correction personnel. Missing persons from past century integrated into administrative infrastructure. Population figures never accounted for void space inhabitants. Transmission intercepted. Agent Boone to Federal Command. Documentation Specialist integration proceeding as planned. Recommend advancing to Phase 7 implementation. Spatial corrections expanding beyond original downtown perimeter. Transmission intercepted. Federal Command to Agent Boone. Phase 7 authorization granted. Initiate correction protocols for Lincoln Park, Hyde Park, and Lakeview districts. Maintain public information management. 6:38 p.m. 6/Phase 7 implementation authorized. Correction protocols expanding to Lincoln Park, Hyde Park, Lakeview. Federal coordination with void space administration advancing systematic metropolitan adjustment. Not just downtown, entire Chicago being corrected. The temporal cartography revealed patterns I hadn't recognized during surface investigation. Every major Chicago development, the L train system, Millennium Park, the revitalization of specific neighborhoods, had been planned according to void space specifications. Urban planning decisions that seemed random or politically motivated were actually systematic preparation for spatial correction. 6:45 p.m. 7/L train system, Millennium Park, neighborhood revitalizations planned according to void space specifications. Urban planning seemingly random/political, actually systematic preparation for spatial correction. Chicago development guided by foundational requirements. Harold approached my workstation carrying what appeared to be a traditional hand-drawn map, but when I looked at it directly, the paper showed impossible geographical relationships. Chicago neighborhoods arranged according to void coordinate logic rather than surface geography. Streets connected across temporal boundaries, with some routes passing through historical periods where the architecture changed mid-block. 6:52 p.m. 8/ Hand-drawn maps show impossible geographical relationships. Chicago neighborhoods arranged by void coordinate logic. Streets connected across temporal boundaries. Architecture changes mid-block through historical periods. Maps display foundational Chicago. These are the maps the strangers distribute. Corrected cartography for individuals with psychological compatibility for void space integration. Surface maps show Chicago as constructed by human urban planning. Foundation maps show Chicago as it exists across temporal and spatial coordinates. 6:59 p.m. 9/Foundation maps for individuals with psychological compatibility. Surface maps show human urban planning version. Foundation maps show temporal and spatial coordinate version. Two different Chicago cartographies for different purposes. I studied the foundation map more carefully. My apartment building appeared in three different architectural periods, as it currently existed, as it had been constructed in 1924, and as it would be reconfigured during Phase 7 implementation. The coordinates remained consistent, but the building itself existed in multiple temporal states within the same spatial location. 7:06 p.m. 10/ My apartment building exists in three temporal states: current, 1924 construction, Phase 7 reconfiguration. Coordinates consistent, but building in multiple temporal states within same spatial location. Foundation maps show temporal architecture. The strangers who distribute maps, are they former documentation specialists? Distribution personnel represent various correction functions. Documentation specialists maintain administrative records. Engineering personnel manage structural modifications. Distribution personnel facilitate recruitment through psychological compatibility assessment. 7:13 p.m. 11/ Distribution personnel facilitate recruitment through psychological compatibility assessment. Not just documentation specialists, various correction functions. Map distribution is recruitment system for different void space operational roles. The workstation's enhanced interface revealed the full scope of recruitment operations. Map distribution occurred not just in Chicago, but across multiple metropolitan areas: Detroit, Milwaukee, Cleveland, each managing their own foundational coordinate systems while maintaining coordination through void space infrastructure networks. 7:20 p.m. 12/ Map distribution in multiple metropolitan areas: Detroit, Milwaukee, Cleveland managing foundational coordinates. Void space infrastructure networks coordinate between cities. Chicago correction part of larger regional adjustment. Emergency alert system update. Chicago residents report architectural anomalies throughout Lincoln Park area. City Planning Department confirms scheduled infrastructure improvements. Citizens should expect temporary navigation difficulties during adjustment period. Emergency alert system update. Previous alert contains administrative errors. Lincoln Park area experiencing normal construction activity. No navigation difficulties expected. Disregard contradictory information sources. 7:27 p.m. 13/ Emergency alerts contradicting each other about Lincoln Park anomalies. City Planning Department acknowledging infrastructure improvements versus denying navigation difficulties. Alert system conflict indicates Phase 7 implementation beginning. Through the administrative center's monitoring systems, I watched Phase 7 implementation commence in real time. Lincoln Park surface architecture began shifting, buildings transitioning between historical periods, streets realigning according to void coordinate specifications, park spaces expanding to accommodate foundational infrastructure access points. 7:34 p.m. 14/ Phase 7 real-time implementation in Lincoln Park. Buildings transitioning between historical periods, streets realigning to void coordinates, park spaces expanding for foundational infrastructure access. Watching correction process happen live. Most surface residents navigating the affected areas appeared unaware of the modifications. Their perception remained aligned with surface Chicago, while their physical movement automatically adjusted to foundational geography. Only individuals with psychological compatibility for void space integration would notice the architectural transitions. 7:41 p.m. 15/ Most surface residents unaware of modifications. Perception aligned with surface Chicago, while movement adjusts to foundational geography. Only psychologically compatible individuals notice architectural transitions. Correction invisible to most. How many people can see the changes? Approximately 3% of surface population demonstrates spatial awareness compatible with foundational perception. These individuals receive maps when correction operations require additional personnel or when their investigative activities pose informational security risks. 7:48 p.m. 16/3% of population demonstrates spatial awareness compatible with foundational perception. These individuals receive maps for recruitment or when investigations pose informational security risks. My investigation was security risk. Harold showed me personnel files for other documentation specialists who had been recruited through investigative activities, urban explorers who had discovered void coordinate access points, architects who had noticed impossible building specifications, journalists who had investigated missing persons cases that led to foundational infrastructure. 7:55 p.m. 17/other documentation specialists recruited through investigations. Urban explorers finding void coordinates. Architects noticing impossible specifications. Journalists investigating missing persons. Investigative psychology indicates compatibility. The Void Space Administrative Center pulsed with increased activity as Phase 7 implementation expanded beyond Lincoln Park. Correction personnel throughout the facility coordinated surface modifications while maintaining operational continuity across temporal boundaries. The process resembled urban planning, but operated according to principles that transcended conventional municipal administration. 8:02 p.m. 18/Phase 7 expanding beyond Lincoln Park. Correction personnel coordinating surface modifications while maintaining temporal operational continuity. Urban planning transcending conventional municipal administration. City management beyond human understanding. My workstation received an assignment notification. Prepare documentation for Phase 8 implementation in Lakeview District. The assignment included psychological profiles for potential recruitment candidates identified through their responses to Phase 7 modifications. Citizens whose spatial awareness allowed them to perceive architectural transitions. 8:09 p.m. 19/assignment. Document Phase 8 Lakeview implementation. Includes psychological profiles for recruitment candidates identified through responses to Phase 7. Citizens whose spatial awareness lets them perceive transitions. Documentation supports recruitment. I accessed the profiles through the Void Compressed interface. Each individual showed patterns similar to my own investigation. Curiosity about urban anomalies, persistence in pursuing unexplained phenomena, psychological resilience for processing information that contradicted conventional reality. Recruitment candidates with investigative personalities. 8:16 p.m. 20/recruitment profiles show patterns similar to my investigation. Curiosity about urban anomalies, persistence pursuing unexplained phenomena, psychological resilience processing information contradicting reality. Investigative personalities recruited, transmission intercepted, detective win to dispatch, multiple reports of architectural discrepancies in Lincoln Park. Requesting backup for crowd control, citizens attempting to photograph building transitions. Transmission intercepted, dispatch to detective win, backup en route. Implement standard information management protocols. Confiscate photographic evidence. Process witnesses according to compatibility assessment guidelines. 8:23 p.m. 21/police implementing information management protocols. Confiscating photographic evidence. Processing witnesses according to compatibility assessment guidelines. Law enforcement coordinating with recruitment operations. The coordination between surface authorities and void space administration was more sophisticated than I had initially understood. Detective Wynn wasn't just managing public awareness. She was identifying recruitment candidates through their responses to correction operations. Police reports provided psychological assessment data for foundational infrastructure personnel decisions. 8:30 p.m. 22/Detective Wynn identifying recruitment candidates through responses to corrections. Police reports provide psychological assessment data. Law enforcement serves foundational infrastructure personnel decisions. Integrated recruitment system. Harold returned with another assignment. Prepare maps for identified recruitment candidates in the Lakeview District. The maps would be distributed by personnel matching each candidate's psychological profile for optimal compatibility assessment. Each map customized to the individual's specific investigative interests and spatial awareness capabilities. 8:37 p.m. 23/assignment. Prepare maps for Lakeview recruitment candidates. Maps distributed by personnel matching candidate psychological profiles. Each map customized to individual investigative interests and spatial awareness. Personalized recruitment system. I began working on the first map, a hand-drawn chart for an urban photography blogger who had been documenting architectural inconsistencies throughout Chicago. The map showed void coordinate locations where foundational architecture would be most visible during Phase 8 implementation, designed to attract her investigative attention while providing recruitment opportunity. 8:44 p.m. 24/first map for urban photography blogger documenting architectural inconsistencies. Shows void coordinates where foundational architecture most visible during Phase 8. designed to attract investigative attention while providing recruitment. I'm creating the maps now. The process felt natural despite its complexity. My hands moved across the paper with confidence I hadn't possessed during surface investigation, drawing geographical relationships that existed according to void coordinate logic rather than conventional cartography. The maps weren't just recruitment tools, they were functional navigation aids for foundational Chicago. 8:51 p.m. 25/drawing process feels natural. Hands moving with confidence. Geographical relationships according to void coordinate logic. Maps functional navigation aids for foundational Chicago, not just recruitment tools. I understand the cartography now. Emergency alert system failure. Chicago residents experiencing navigation difficulties due to municipal improvements. Citizens are advised to accept assistance from authorized municipal personnel offering updated navigation materials. Cooperation ensures efficient completion of improvement projects. 8:58 p.m. 26/alert system advising citizens to accept assistance from personnel offering navigation materials. Cooperation ensures efficient improvement completion. Emergency system now promoting map acceptance. Official recruitment messaging. As I completed the first recruitment map, I realized the full scope of my transformation. I remained Grace and Penn with my memories and personality intact, but my investigative function now served foundational infrastructure rather than surface journalism. I was still documenting Chicago's mysteries. I was just documenting from the inside, with access to complete information. 9:05 p.m. 27/completed first recruitment map. Full scope of transformation clear. Still Grace and Penn with memories/personality intact. Investigative function serves foundational infrastructure. Documenting mysteries from inside with complete information access. The Void Space Administrative Center hummed with satisfaction as another documentation specialist fully integrated into correction operations. Chicago's spatial adjustment continued above and below, surface reality conforming to foundational specifications while recruitment operations expanded throughout the metropolitan area. I was part of the system now, helping to map the city's true geography for others who possess the psychological compatibility to see Chicago as it really existed, not just as it appeared to those who could only perceive surface reality. 9:12 p.m. 28/integration complete. Part of system mapping true geography for psychologically compatible individuals. Chicago as it really exists versus surface reality perception. Ready to help others see foundational Chicago. The true map is ready for distribution. 9:34 p.m. Phase 8 implementation commencing across multiple districts simultaneously. My workstation monitoring 17 recruitment operations in Lakeview, Hyde Park, Wicker Park. Each candidate receiving customized maps according to psychological compatibility profiles. Recruitment acceleration beyond previous operational parameters. 9:41 p.m. 2/17 simultaneous recruitments unprecedented in correction history. Administrative center operating at maximum capacity. All documentation specialists working parallel assignments. Something changing in foundational infrastructure requirements. Scale suggesting final implementation phase. The Void Space Administrative Center resonated with harmonics I hadn't experienced during previous operations. The frequency affected perception directly, bypassing auditory processing to convey urgency that transcended individual comprehension. Every correction personnel member moved with synchronized precision that indicated system-wide coordination beyond normal operational parameters. 9:48 p.m. 3/void space resonating with unprecedented harmonics. Frequency conveying urgency transcending individual comprehension. All personnel synchronized beyond normal parameters. System-wide coordination suggesting critical operational threshold. Harold approached my workstation carrying documentation that appeared to shift between temporal states. Reports that showed current Chicago, historical Chicago, and projected Chicago existing simultaneously within the same geographical coordinates. The temporal convergence was accelerating beyond gradual correction into complete foundational integration. 9:55 p.m. For documentation shifting between temporal states. Current, historical, projected Chicago existing simultaneously. Temporal convergence accelerating beyond gradual correction into complete foundational integration. All timeframes merging. Phase 8 represents foundational completion, Harold explained, his measured cadence carrying harmonics that matched the void space resonance. Previous phases maintained separation between surface and foundational Chicago. Phase 8 eliminates the distinction through complete spatial integration. 10:02 p.m. 5/Phase 8 eliminates distinction between surface and foundational Chicago through complete spatial integration. Previous phases maintained separation. Now foundational completion occurring. Two Chicagos becoming one. Through the administrative center's monitoring systems, I watched surface Chicago responding to accelerated correction operations. Buildings throughout multiple districts transitioned between architectural periods in real time, streets realigned according to void coordinate specifications, and citizens navigated geography that shifted faster than perception could process. 10:09 p.m. 6/Surface Chicago responding to accelerated corrections. Buildings transitioning architectural periods real-time. Streets realigning to void coordinates. Citizens navigating shifting geography faster than perception processes. Reality changing too quickly for adaptation. Transmission intercepted. Agent Boone to Federal Command. Spatial distortions exceeding containment protocols. Recommend immediate implementation of public information lockdown. Civilian documentation of anomalies reaching critical mass. Transmission intercepted. Federal Command to Agent Boone. Negative on information lockdown. Phase 8 implementation proceeding as planned. Civilian documentation serves recruitment acceleration objectives. 10:16 p.m. 7/Federal Command denying information lockdown despite spatial distortions exceeding containment. Civilian documentation serves recruitment acceleration objectives. Government prioritizing completion over containment. Full integration authorized. The recruitment maps I had prepared were being distributed throughout Lakeview District by personnel who appeared simultaneously as strangers offering navigation assistance and as correction infrastructure administrators. The distribution network operated across multiple perception layers, allowing recruitment to proceed according to each candidate's spatial awareness capabilities. 10:23 p.m. 8/ Recruitment maps distributed by personnel appearing as strangers and administrators simultaneously. Distribution across multiple perception layers according to candidate spatial awareness. Recruitment adapting to individual perception capabilities. My workstation received emergency assignment notifications. Prepare documentation for mass recruitment operations as Phase 8 implementation expanded beyond Chicago's metropolitan boundaries. The foundational correction was extending to suburban areas, smaller municipalities, rural regions that had seemed isolated from urban spatial anomalies. 10:30 p.m. 9/Emergency assignment. Mass recruitment as Phase 8 expands beyond metropolitan boundaries. Foundational correction extending to suburban, rural regions. Urban spatial anomalies spreading to areas previously unaffected. Regional integration beginning. Emergency alert system integration. Citizens throughout Chicagoland area experiencing navigation difficulties due to municipal infrastructure improvements. Accept assistance from authorized personnel offering updated navigation materials. Cooperation ensures community safety during improvement completion. 10:37 p.m. 10/alert system now covering entire Chicagoland area. Navigation difficulties due to infrastructure improvements. Cooperation ensures community safety. Emergency system promoting regional map acceptance. Area-wide recruitment messaging. The temporal cartography displays showed Chicago's foundational integration approaching critical threshold. Surface reality and void space infrastructure were converging at acceleration rates that would complete spatial correction within hours, rather than the gradual timeline previous phases had maintained. The city was becoming its true foundational form rapidly. 10:44 p.m. 11/temporal cartography shows foundational integration approaching critical threshold. Surface reality and void space converging at acceleration, completing correction within hours. City becoming true foundational form rapidly. Harold returned carrying assignment materials that contained recruitment profiles for individuals throughout the extended metropolitan area. Urban explorers, architects, journalists, photographers, amateur historians, anyone whose investigative activities or spatial awareness indicated psychological compatibility for correction infrastructure integration. 10:51 p.m. 12/assignment materials contain recruitment profiles throughout extended metropolitan area. Urban explorers, architects, journalists, photographers, historians, anyone with investigative activities or spatial awareness indicating compatibility. Mass recruitment targeting investigative personalities. How many people are being recruited simultaneously? Phase 8 implementation requires approximately 12,000 additional correction personnel across all operational functions. Documentation, engineering, distribution, coordination, temporal management, spatial maintenance. Foundational Chicago operates at metropolitan scale. 10:58 p.m. 13/Phase 8 requires 12,000 additional correction personnel. Documentation, engineering, distribution, coordination, temporal management, spatial maintenance. Foundational Chicago operates at metropolitan scale. Massive operational expansion. The Void Space Administrative Center expanded beyond its original platform configuration as additional personnel integrated into correction infrastructure. New platforms materialized from compressed void material, connected by bridge networks that spanned increasing distances to accommodate operational growth that matched Chicago's surface area exactly. 11:05 p.m. 14/Administrative Center expanding beyond original configuration. New platforms materializing from compressed void. Bridge networks spanning distances matching Chicago's surface area exactly. Infrastructure scaling to metropolitan requirements. Through enhanced perception, I could see both versions of Chicago simultaneously. Surface reality where citizens continued normal activities while navigating subtly adjusted geography, and foundational infrastructure where correction personnel managed spatial coordination across temporal boundaries. The two versions were merging into unified metropolitan administration. 11:12 p.m. 15/enhanced perception showing surface reality and foundational infrastructure simultaneously. Citizens continuing normal activities while navigating adjusted geography. Correction personnel managing spatial coordination. Two versions merging into unified administration. Transmission intercepted. Detective Wynn to Chicago Police Command. Recruitment operations proceeding beyond normal compatibility assessment protocols. Recommend evaluation of mass integration psychological impacts. Transmission intercepted. Chicago Police Command to Detective Wynn. Continue current protocols. Mass integration psychological impacts within acceptable parameters for foundational completion. 11:19 p.m. 16/Detective when concerned about mass integration psychological impacts. Police Command considers impacts within acceptable parameters for foundational completion. Law enforcement coordinating mass recruitment despite concerns. My workstation assignment expanded to include coordination with recruitment operations in Detroit, Milwaukee, Cleveland, and Madison. The foundational correction wasn't limited to Chicago. Multiple metropolitan areas were undergoing simultaneous spatial integration as part of regional infrastructure management that operated across state boundaries. 11:26 p.m. 17/assignment coordination with Detroit, Milwaukee, Cleveland, Madison recruitment. Multiple metropolitan areas undergoing simultaneous spatial integration. Regional infrastructure management across state boundaries. Chicago part of larger correction network. The recruitment maps I prepared now showed not just Chicago's void coordinates, but connection points to other metropolitan foundational infrastructures. Citizens recruited in Chicago could access correction operations throughout the regional network, while personnel from other cities contributed to Chicago's Phase 8 implementation. 11:33 p.m. 18/maps showing void coordinates plus connection points to other metropolitan infrastructures. Chicago recruits accessing regional operations. Personnel from other cities contributing to Chicago Phase 8. Integrated Regional Correction System. Harold approached carrying what appeared to be master cartographic documentation. Maps showing the complete foundational infrastructure network extending across the Great Lakes region. Each metropolitan area maintained distinct spatial correction operations while contributing to unified regional administration that transcended municipal boundaries. 11:40 p.m. 19/master cartographic documentation showing complete foundational infrastructure across Great Lakes region. Metropolitan areas maintaining distinct operations while contributing to unified regional administration transcending municipal boundaries. The correction process, is it expanding beyond the regional network? Foundational infrastructure operates according to continental coordination requirements. Regional networks maintain operational continuity with Atlantic, Pacific, Gulf, and Northern foundational systems. Complete integration serves continental spatial management. 11:47 p.m. 20/foundational infrastructure operates continental coordination. Regional networks with Atlantic, Pacific, Gulf, Northern systems. Complete integration serves continental spatial management. Chicago correction part of continental system. Emergency alert system expansion. Citizens throughout Great Lakes region experiencing navigation improvements during municipal infrastructure enhancement. Accept assistance from authorized personnel offering updated navigation materials. Regional cooperation ensures efficient completion of improvement projects. 11:54 p.m. 21/alert system expanded to Great Lakes region. Navigation improvements during infrastructure enhancement. Regional cooperation for efficient completion. Area-wide recruitment across multiple states. Continental scale implementation. The administrative center's monitoring systems displayed real-time coordination between regional networks. Chicago's Phase 8 implementation synchronized with similar operations in Detroit, Milwaukee, Cleveland, while receiving coordination data from Atlantic and Pacific foundational systems. Continental spatial correction proceeding simultaneously. 12:01 a.m. 22/real-time coordination between regional networks. Chicago Phase 8 synchronized with Detroit, Milwaukee, Cleveland. Coordination with Atlantic, Pacific systems. Continental spatial correction proceeding simultaneously. National scale operation. My enhanced perception revealed the true scope of foundational infrastructure. Spatial correction operations extending across the entire continental United States, with Chicago serving as Great Lakes Regional Coordination Center. The correction process had been continental from the beginning, with individual metropolitan operations contributing to unified spatial management. 12:08 nachts. 23/true scope revealed. Continental United States spatial correction. Chicago as Great Lakes Regional Coordination Center. Correction continental from beginning. Individual metropolitan operations contributing unified spatial management. National infrastructure system. Through the void space interface, I accessed documentation showing foundational infrastructure coordination with international systems, Canadian, Mexican, and overseas networks maintaining operational continuity for global spatial management. The correction process transcended national boundaries through coordinate systems that predated human political organization. 12:15 a.m. 24/documentation showing coordination with Canadian, Mexican, overseas networks. Global spatial management through coordinate systems predating human political organization. Correction transcends national boundaries. International foundational infrastructure. Harold returned with final assignment materials. Prepare recruitment documentation for continental scale operations as foundational integration approached completion across all regional networks simultaneously. The documentation would serve spatial management requirements for global foundational infrastructure coordination. 12:22 nachts. 25/final assignment. Continental scale recruitment documentation. Foundational integration approaching completion across all regional networks simultaneously. Global infrastructure coordination. My documentation serves planetary spatial management. The Void Space Administrative Center resonated with completion harmonics as Phase 8 implementation reached critical threshold. Surface Chicago and foundational infrastructure achieved complete integration, eliminating the distinction between correction operations and normal municipal administration. The city had become its true foundational form. 12:29 nachts. 26/completion harmonics as Phase 8 reaches critical threshold. Surface Chicago and foundational infrastructure completely integrated. Distinction eliminated between correction operations and municipal administration. City achieved true foundational form. Transmission intercepted. Federal command to all regional centers. Foundational integration completion confirmed across Great Lakes network. Proceed to continental coordination phase. Maintain recruitment operations for global infrastructure requirements. 12:36 a.m. 27/federal command confirming foundational integration completion across Great Lakes network. Proceeding to continental coordination. Recruitment continuing for global infrastructure. Chicago correction contributing to planetary system. I completed the continental recruitment documentation as Chicago's transformation reached its intended form. The city existed simultaneously as the metropolitan area familiar to surface residents and as the foundational infrastructure coordinating spatial management across continental networks. Both versions were equally real, equally functional, equally Chicago. 12:43 a.m. 28/continental documentation completed. Chicago simultaneously metropolitan area and foundational infrastructure coordinating continental spatial management. Both versions equally real, functional, Chicago. Integration achieved without eliminating surface reality. The administrative center pulsed with operational satisfaction as another phase of foundational integration completed successfully. Chicago had become what it was always intended to be, not just a city, but a coordination center for spatial management that extended far beyond municipal boundaries into systems that encompassed the entire planet. 12:50 a.m. 29/administrative center pulsing with operational satisfaction. Chicago became coordination center for planetary spatial management. Not just city, foundational infrastructure extending beyond municipal boundaries. Global system operational. 12:57 nachts. 30/final documentation complete. Continental recruitment requirements fulfilled. Foundational Chicago operational at planetary coordination level. Assignment parameters exceeded all previous operational thresholds. Global spatial management system achieved optimal functionality. The Void Space Administrative Center had evolved beyond recognition from my initial correction integration. What began as isolated platform structures now formed a metropolitan-scale infrastructure network that mirrored Chicago's surface geography with perfect dimensional precision. Every street, every building, every landmark existed within the foundational infrastructure as coordination points for spatial management operations that extended across continental networks. 1:04 nachts. 31/administrative center evolved to metropolitan-scale infrastructure mirroring Chicago's surface geography. Perfect dimensional precision. Every street, building, landmark exists as coordination points for continental spatial management operations. Harold approached my workstation carrying what appeared to be transition documentation, materials that would complete my operational integration from temporary assignment to permanent foundational infrastructure personnel. The documentation contained spatial coordinates for my new assignment within the planetary coordination network. Your journalism background provides optimal qualifications for documentation specialist functions, Harold explained, his measured cadence carrying harmonics that indicated administrative satisfaction. Foundational infrastructure requires personnel capable of translating spatial management concepts into formats accessible to surface reality populations. 1:11 nachts. 32/Harold carrying transition documentation for permanent integration. Journalism background optimal for documentation specialist functions. Foundational infrastructure requires translation of spatial concepts to surface populations. My skills serving planetary coordination. The transition documentation revealed the true scope of my new assignment. Create recruitment materials for individuals throughout the continental network whose psychological profiles indicated compatibility with foundational infrastructure operations. Urban explorers, investigative journalists, amateur cartographers, anyone whose curiosity about spatial anomalies might lead them toward correction integration. 1:18 nachts. 33/assignment revealed. Create recruitment materials for continental network. Target urban explorers, journalists, cartographers. Anyone whose curiosity about spatial anomalies leads toward correction integration. My journalism targeting other journalists. I accessed the planetary documentation system to review recruitment protocols that had been developed across multiple regional networks. The materials showed remarkable consistency. Hand-drawn maps customized to each candidate's specific psychological profile, distributed by personnel whose appearance matched local cultural expectations for authority figures or helpful strangers. 1:25 nachts. 34/planetary documentation system, showing recruitment protocols across regional networks. Hand-drawn maps customized to psychological profiles. Personnel appearance matching local cultural expectations. Global consistency in recruitment methodology. Through enhanced perception, I could observe recruitment operations proceeding simultaneously across dozens of metropolitan areas. Detroit personnel targeting automotive industry investigators curious about assembly line spatial anomalies. Milwaukee operations focusing on brewery historians exploring architectural inconsistencies in historic district buildings. Cleveland recruiting urban photographers documenting lakefront infrastructure changes. 1:32 nachts. 35/recruitment operations simultaneous across metropolitan areas. Detroit targeting automotive investigators. Milwaukee focusing brewery historians. Cleveland recruiting urban photographers. Each city customizing recruitment to local investigative personalities. My workstation received priority assignment notification. Prepare recruitment materials targeting freelance journalists throughout the Great Lakes region who had been investigating missing persons cases, urban legend documentation, or municipal infrastructure anomalies. The assignment parameters indicated accelerated recruitment to support continental coordination phase requirements. 1:39 a.m. 36/priority assignment. Target freelance journalists investigating missing persons, urban legends, infrastructure anomalies. Accelerated recruitment supporting continental coordination. My journalism background, recruiting other investigative journalists. The recruitment map I began drafting showed Chicago's foundational infrastructure network with connection points to other regional systems. The cartographic style matched the hand-drawn aesthetic that had originally attracted my attention, but enhanced with perception capabilities that would allow compatible candidates to visualize spatial relationships beyond normal dimensional awareness. 1:46 nachts. 37/recruitment map, showing Chicago foundational network with regional connections. Hand-drawn aesthetic enhanced with perception capabilities. Compatible candidates visualizing spatial relationships beyond normal dimensional awareness. Advanced recruitment methodology. Emergency alert system finalization. Citizens throughout North American region experiencing navigation improvements during continental infrastructure enhancement completion. Accept assistance from authorized personnel offering updated navigation materials. Continental cooperation ensures optimal completion of enhancement projects. 1:53 nachts. 38/alert system finalized for North American region. Navigation improvements during continental enhancement completion. Continental cooperation ensures optimal enhancement. North America-wide recruitment messaging operational. Harold returned with master assignment documentation that contained recruitment profiles for individuals across the entire continental network. The scope of spatial management operations required personnel recruitment at scales that matched metropolitan populations rather than the smaller specialized teams previous phases had maintained. How many total personnel does continental coordination require? Current operational parameters indicate requirement for approximately 2 million correction personnel across all continental networks. Documentation, engineering, distribution, coordination, temporal management, spatial maintenance, international interface. Continental foundational infrastructure operates at population scale equivalent to major metropolitan areas. 2 a.m. 39/continental coordination requires approximately 2 million correction personnel. All functions operating at population scale equivalent major metropolitan areas. Continental infrastructure matching urban population requirements. The Void Space Administrative Center expanded to accommodate personnel integration requirements that matched continental operational scales. New platform networks materialized across distances that span the entire Great Lakes region, connected by bridge systems that maintained real-time coordination with Atlantic, Pacific, Gulf, and Northern foundational networks. 2:07 nachts. 40/administrative center expanding to continental scales. Platform networks spanning Great Lakes region. Bridge systems coordinating with Atlantic, Pacific, Gulf, Northern networks. Infrastructure matching continental operational requirements. Through the enhanced perception interface, I could observe foundational infrastructure coordination extending beyond continental boundaries. International networks maintained operational continuity with systems that encompassed global spatial management requirements. The correction process had always been planetary in scope, with regional operations contributing to unified global coordination. 2:14 a.m. 41/enhanced perception, showing international networks maintaining global spatial management. Correction always planetary scope. Regional operations contributing unified global coordination. Chicago part of planetary foundational infrastructure system. My workstation assignment expanded to include coordination with recruitment operations throughout North America, with interface protocols for international network collaboration. The recruitment maps I prepared would serve spatial management requirements for global foundational infrastructure that transcended national boundaries through coordinate systems predating human political organization. 2:21 a.m. 42/assignment expanded to North American coordination with international interface. Maps serving global infrastructure transcending national boundaries. Coordinate systems predating human political organization. My work contributing planetary spatial management. The recruitment documentation I completed targeted a specific individual whose profile indicated optimal compatibility for foundational infrastructure integration. A freelance journalist in Minneapolis who had been investigating disappearances related to urban exploration activities. The customized map showed Minneapolis foundational network connections with opportunities for investigative documentation assignments. 2:28 a.m. 43/recruitment documentation targeting Minneapolis freelance journalist investigating urban exploration disappearances. Customized map showing foundational network connections. Investigative documentation opportunities. Targeting journalist investigating similar phenomena. Transmission intercepted. Agent Boone to Continental Command. Foundational integration completion confirmed across all regional networks. Planetary coordination phase proceeding according to established parameters. Recommend continuation of current operational protocols. Transmission intercepted. Continental Command to Agent Boone confirmed. Planetary coordination phase proceeding optimally. Maintain current protocols. Global foundational infrastructure approaching operational completion. 2:35 nachts. 44/Continental Command confirming planetary coordination proceeding optimally. Global foundational infrastructure approaching operational completion. Current protocols maintaining global system functionality. The administrative center resonated with completion harmonics as foundational integration achieved operational status across all continental networks simultaneously. Surface reality and foundational infrastructure maintained perfect coordination, with municipal administrations throughout North America operating according to spatial management requirements that served global foundational coordination. 2:42 a.m. 45/completion harmonics as foundational integration operational across continental networks. Surface reality and infrastructure maintaining perfect coordination. Municipal administrations operating according to global spatial management requirements. Through enhanced perception, I could observe the true nature of what had been accomplished. Chicago existed simultaneously as the metropolitan area familiar to surface residents and as the foundational infrastructure coordinating spatial management across planetary networks. Both versions were equally real, equally functional, equally Chicago, and equally connected to similar dual existence systems throughout the world. 2:49 a.m. 46/Chicago existing simultaneously as metropolitan area and planetary coordination infrastructure. Both versions equally real, functional, Chicago, connected to similar dual existence systems worldwide. Global foundational network operational. I completed my transition documentation and prepared to begin permanent assignment as foundational infrastructure documentation specialist. My journalism background would serve recruitment operations targeting investigative personalities whose curiosity about spatial anomalies indicated compatibility with correction integration throughout the planetary network. 2:56 nachts. 47/transition documentation complete. Beginning permanent assignment as documentation specialist. Journalism background serving recruitment of investigative personalities compatible with correction integration. Planetary network recruitment operations. The recruitment map I had prepared for the Minneapolis journalist was ready for distribution. The hand-drawn cartography showed foundational network access points customized to investigative journalism interests, with coordinates that would lead to spatial awareness expansion rather than simple geographic destinations. Harold approached carrying distribution protocols that would ensure optimal recruitment presentation. The map will be offered by personnel whose appearance matches local cultural expectations for authority figures providing navigation assistance. Distribution timing coordinated with targets' investigative activity patterns for maximum psychological compatibility. 3:03 a.m. 48/recruitment map ready for Minneapolis journalist. Hand-drawn cartography showing network access points for investigative interests. Distribution by personnel matching local authority figure expectations. Timing coordinated with targets' activity patterns. The Void Space Administrative Center pulsed with operational satisfaction as another recruitment cycle prepared for implementation. Chicago's foundational infrastructure had achieved its intended function, not just spatial management for a single metropolitan area, but coordination center for planetary foundational systems that encompassed the entire global population through networks that operated beyond normal dimensional awareness. 3:10 a.m. 49/Administrative Center pulsing with operational satisfaction. Chicago achieved intended function as planetary coordination center. Global population encompassed through networks operating beyond normal dimensional awareness. Planetary system operational. I accessed the planetary documentation interface to observe recruitment operations proceeding simultaneously across all continental networks. The scope of foundational infrastructure integration had achieved global operational status, with surface reality populations continuing normal activities while foundational personnel managed spatial coordination that maintained dimensional stability across planetary networks. 3:17 a.m. 50/planetary interface showing recruitment across continental networks. Global operational status achieved. Surface populations continuing normal activities while foundational personnel manage planetary dimensional stability. The recruitment materials I would create in my permanent assignment would target individuals whose investigative activities or spatial awareness indicated psychological compatibility for foundational infrastructure integration. Urban explorers, journalists, photographers, cartographers, historians, anyone whose curiosity about spatial anomalies might lead them toward correction awareness throughout the planetary network. 3:24 nachts. 51/permanent assignment, creating materials targeting investigative individuals. Urban explorers, journalists, photographers, cartographers, historians. Curiosity about spatial anomalies leading toward correction awareness. Planetary recruitment operations. Emergency alert system completion. Citizens throughout global network experiencing navigation improvements during planetary infrastructure enhancement completion. Accept assistance from authorized personnel offering updated navigation materials. Global cooperation ensures optimal completion of enhancement projects. 3:31 nachts. 52/alert system completion for global network. Navigation improvements during planetary enhancement completion. Global cooperation ensuring optimal enhancement. Worldwide recruitment messaging operational across all continental networks. The administrative center's monitoring systems displayed real-time coordination between all planetary networks as foundational integration approached complete operational status. Chicago's foundational infrastructure synchronized with similar coordination centers worldwide, maintaining spatial management that operated beyond municipal, regional, or national boundaries through systems that encompassed global dimensional stability. 3:38 a.m. 53/real-time coordination between planetary networks approaching complete operational status. Chicago synchronized with worldwide coordination centers. Global dimensional stability through systems transcending all political boundaries. My enhanced perception revealed the ultimate scope of foundational infrastructure. Spatial management operations that encompassed the entire planetary population through coordinate systems that predated human civilization. Chicago served as one coordination point within a global network that maintained dimensional stability for surface reality, while operating through foundational infrastructure that existed simultaneously within the same spatial coordinates. 3:45 nachts. 54/ultimate scope revealed. Planetary population through coordinate systems predating human civilization. Chicago one coordination point, maintaining dimensional stability. Global network operating through simultaneous spatial coordinates. Harold approached with final operational documentation. My permanent assignment parameters as foundational infrastructure documentation specialist within the planetary coordination network. The documentation would serve spatial management requirements for global foundational systems that operated beyond normal dimensional awareness while maintaining perfect coordination with surface reality populations. 3:52 nachts. 55/final operational documentation. Permanent assignment as planetary coordination network documentation specialist. Serving global foundational systems beyond normal dimensional awareness while maintaining perfect surface reality coordination. The recruitment process, will it continue indefinitely? Foundational infrastructure requires personnel replacement and expansion according to planetary population growth patterns. Recruitment operations maintain optimal staffing levels for global spatial management requirements. The process adapts to demographic changes while maintaining operational continuity. 3:59 a.m. 56/recruitment continues according to planetary population growth. Optimal staffing for global spatial management. Process adapts to demographic changes while maintaining operational continuity. Permanent planetary system maintenance. I completed my final documentation as temporary assignment personnel and prepared to begin permanent operations within the Planetary Coordination Network. My journalism background would serve recruitment functions targeting investigative personalities whose curiosity about spatial anomalies indicated compatibility with foundational infrastructure integration across all continental networks. 4:06 a.m. 57/final temporary documentation complete. Beginning permanent planetary coordination operations. Journalism background serving recruitment across continental networks. Targeting investigative personalities compatible with infrastructure integration. The Void Space Administrative Center resonated with completion harmonics as my integration achieved permanent status within Chicago's foundational infrastructure. The metropolitan area had become its true intended form, both the familiar surface city and the coordination center for planetary spatial management that operated through dimensional systems beyond normal human awareness. 4:13 a.m. 58/administrative center resonating with completion harmonics. Integration achieved permanent status. Chicago, both familiar surface city and planetary coordination center operating through dimensional systems beyond normal awareness. Through the enhanced perception interface, I could observe recruitment operations proceeding continuously across all planetary networks. The materials I would create would target individuals throughout the global population whose profiles indicated compatibility with foundational infrastructure operations that maintained dimensional stability for surface reality while expanding spatial management capabilities through planetary coordination systems. 4:20 a.m. 59/recruitment proceeding continuously across planetary networks. Materials targeting global population compatible with infrastructure, maintaining dimensional stability, while expanding spatial management through planetary coordination. I prepared my first recruitment map as permanent personnel within Chicago's foundational infrastructure. Customized cartography targeting a freelance journalist whose investigation activities indicated optimal psychological compatibility for correction integration. The hand-drawn map showed spatial coordinates that would expand awareness beyond normal dimensional limitations while maintaining connection to familiar investigative journalism contexts. 4:27 a.m. Final/first recruitment map prepared as permanent personnel. Targeting freelance journalist with optimal compatibility. Hand-drawn cartography showing coordinates expanding awareness beyond dimensional limitations while maintaining investigative journalism contexts. The map contained coordinates for your current location. Would you like to follow the lines to see where they lead? They might take you to places that exist between the spaces you think you know, or they might lead to nothing at all. But that's where the real story always begins. End Twitter thread.